Okay, I'm turning it on.
I just make sure I go.
Welcome, everyone. I will call the regular town council meeting of Monday, May 12th to order at 5 p.m. And we have the agenda in front of us. CAO, any additions, deletions? I know the rest of your worship, thank you. Someone please move the adoption of the agenda. Councillor Ford moves. And all those in favor? It's carried, thank you. Then we have the minutes of the April 28th, 2025 regular council meeting. Had a chance to review.
So it was brought to my attention by someone with keener vision than I that the motions, a number of the motions have the wrong number in them. They should have the number 4 and not the number in the minutes.
Fourth month instead of doing it.
Yes, so just
Okay,
just a typo there.
Where was that?
all the motions.
The motions in the minutes say 03 where the month number should be.
Oh,
instead
look
of
at
03.
that, yeah.
Again, I'd like to claim the hypervigilance and intelligence of catching that on my own, but that was not
Okay, would you like to move the minutes
as amended
okay?
or with those amendments.
All those in favor? It's carried, thank you. Next up, we have public hearings. We don't have any presentations, none. Bylaws, meeting procedures, Ms. Parsons.
Thank you, Mayor Manzer, and good evening, council. So we're seeing the meeting procedures bylaw again for the second time. This was presented last week at the G&P meeting. So you'll see quite a bit of red in here. Some of it is just fixing just some typos, capitalizations, words that didn't need capitalizations. So those are just some really minor updates that you'll see. Starting in the definition section, one note that we had made last time was whether or not the mayor was appropriately described as being the chair for the meetings of council. And I just want to confirm that is in the definition for the definition of chair. That is in there, and then just some more cleanup. Moving on to page 6 of the draft bylaw, appointment to council committees and external boards or agencies. Clean that up a little bit, removing the need for the mayor to compile and make recommendations, and it just simply says in advance of the meeting that council members will put forward their names, and then that list will come forward to the council at the organizational meeting for consideration and formal appointment. And then explaining what happens if the agreement can't be met when if more than one name is put forward for fewer seats. Any concerns with that change? Does that suffice for the concerns?
Must be good.
Oh, I didn't say much.
Then on to 6.1 changed.
Actually, we can go back to 5.7. If you don't mind. It says by virtue of the office of mayor is ex officio of all committees. But the committees, external boards and agencies, so she's ex officio on all committees. Does not include external boards and committees. The word committees is separated and not included on the second line. So by this, unless you're using committees as inclusive, in which case that wouldn't be correct.
I will double check and make sure that does.
Yeah, that's
a good call.
basically it. I think it
Mhm.
needs a bit of
Yep.
clarification there.
Good note, thank you. 6.1. Change that to be that the meetings won't go past 10:30, which is mirroring the current bylaw. 6.2G, unfinished business, just a little bit more clarity about what would go under unfinished business. For example, if a matter was postponed from a previous meeting, it would go there. Like, for example, last meeting, we postponed the the purchasing policy. And then again, I is comments from the public. The changes are reflected from the discussion last meeting, changing to allow people 5 minutes to speak. And that it's on a first come, first serve basis, and adding that it's a maximum of 5 persons per meeting, unless otherwise permitted by the chair.
So we talked last week about there being a list someplace. Is that? Could
So
we,
that's in the GMP section. I didn't do that for the regular council meeting because the comments have to be, can only address items on the agenda. So theoretically, there shouldn't be anything extra, whereas the GMP meetings could be any number of things. So that one, they have to have the sign up sheet.
okay,
And so going into GMP, 7.2 mirrors the changes under the regular meetings, not going past 10:30. Again, adding in E, comments from the public, it's on a first come, first served basis. And with the sign up sheet at the beginning of the meeting, where they have to indicate the topics that they wish to speak to. And again, under G, unfinished business, just adding that little bit more clarity. Under 9, meeting minutes. I just added or administration regularly in attendance as names that will be listed on minutes. I realized having director or equivalent didn't account for positions like Stuart, who attends every meeting. So just adding that for a little bit of added clarity. And the time of recess is also added there. Under participation by electronic means, number 11, just at the very beginning, adding that in-person attendance is the preferred method, and then going on to outline how you can attend by electronic means. And 11.3, adding that further clarity that it must be the council member's live face in front of their camera while the meeting is in session. And then under, oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, my only, just on that one there, just one comment was, what happens if you're in a situation that you're possibly at a conference or somewhere and the Wi-Fi is not that good, where if you have, because we've experienced it in the past, where if you have your video on, it just doesn't seem, sometimes the technology doesn't cooperate properly.
So a couple of things, either one, you just don't attend the meeting. It's really important that we know who's in the room at what time, for understanding who is making motions, is there quorum, does that person potentially have a pecuniary interest that they need to be divulging? We need to know who's in the room. So either one, you just don't attend the meeting. 2, there is the ability for council to make a motion to waive that requirement and say, no, we really need this person here and we're okay with their camera not being on. But for the most part, if you're attending, I mean, virtual attendance is great and it's opened a lot of doors, but it should be as if you were here. You need to be able to participate in the meeting as if you're in this room for voting. And so people can see that you're actually there. So there are a few options if that is the case and council wants to make that motion to allow that, but otherwise, you would just be marked as absent.
Yeah, and Mike, like I say, my comments, I don't disagree with it, but for instance, when you're attending the Zoom meeting, it's administration that has to let the council member in to attend by acceptance. So the administration knows that is me behind that screen, just like right now. The way the screen reads, it says Pat Fisher, director, we know it's him behind the screen because of his
Well,
administration that let him in.
We know he got in, but we don't know if he's sitting there.
so if I may say so, you don't know. Because the name is whatever the person wants you to see. If Pat Fisher decided right now to change his name to Billy Bob Thornton, it
He
would
could.
say Billy Bob Thornton, so you don't know. And the other thing is like, even at Northeast Housing, we did it for exactly those reasons, that the responsibility for having adequate bandwidth to attend a meeting is the responsibility of the member or the council. So if you can't ensure that you have bandwidth to do it, you can't really attend. And we were having issues where, I don't know if the person was there or not there, but we would ask something of them and there would be no response. Well, I can't say they weren't there. They may have been having bandwidth issues. We couldn't communicate with them to confirm that they were there or not there. So it makes it really difficult.
Mhm.
So the understanding then is it's just, if you're having a bandwidth issue and you were out of town, it's just a motion of council to allow you to attend the meeting if you can't have a camera.
If it's necessary.
We did, like, I understand you did miss the GMP meeting. We did discuss this quite extensively,
Yeah.
so for the sake of maybe not wondering, and if anyone's wondering why our reactions were the way they were, Director Fisher did for about 45 seconds change his name to Billy Bob Thornton.
Yes, he did.
I did not see that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That's why you're,
The snickering.
no arguments here, just questions.
so I'll ask the question since Mr. Fisher is on virtual. So after this is passed, the expectation is if counselors, and there would be an expectation that staff would also be live, like that would be, I realize it's CAO business,
It's
but
not the same,
why not?
because they don't have to vote or they're pecuniary interest, all those things that apply to us don't apply necessarily to them.
Yeah, the intention is because it matters which members of council are in the room. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter which members of staff are in the room. And so I mean, I would think most of the time, if a member of staff is going to present, they would turn on their camera. If a member of staff were invited into closed session while they're virtual, would suggest that they would turn on their camera because you need to be able to see who's in the room. But otherwise, the intention is because it mattered. It matters when council's in the room and that gets recorded, but if staff leave or anything, I don't record any of that.
Okay.
Good.
Thanks.
Okay. So then 12.7, I just took out the equivalent to in-person participation. I had sent this for review and it caused a little bit of confusion. And the intention was that you're making submissions in real time as if you were in person. But your participation while you're virtual isn't equivalent to being in person. You're not in person. And so you might find a little bit of difference between yourself being in person versus online. But the intention is that it's in real time as if you're in front of council. And in real time, I think suffices for that. In 14.0, I just removed the division 2 of part 1 of the FOIP Act, just simply because the province may be repealing the FOIP Act this spring, in which case specific references will be a hindrance as opposed to just saying the FOIP Act and then the definition of the FOIP Act is or as replaced by other legislation. So it just cuts that out. 15.5, there was a little bit of confusion with that, so we just removed the within 15 minutes. So it's just if quorum is present, but the mayor and deputy mayor are not there. The CAO has the ability to call the meeting to order and ask for a chair to be selected by resolution, as is the process for selecting a chair in the bylaw. 16.2. There was some discussion about whether or not the chair should be allowed to make motions. It seemed at the time that it was leaning towards not being able to make a motion while they're chair. So that's been adjusted to say that they can't make a motion, but they may participate in debate. And then it has a subclause 16.2A, which just outlines how the chair could make a motion should they so desire. They would have to leave the chair, designate someone else as chair, complete that motion, have the vote of council, and then they could resume their position as chair. Okay, well, sorry.
Yeah, just a question on 15.5. So if the mayor or deputy mayor are not in the room and the meeting is called to order, but the mayor or deputy mayor is late and a chair is selected, does that hinder the mayor or deputy mayor taking over that chair position, or does the chair that's selected continue for the rest of the meeting?
I mean, theoretically, if the mayor or deputy mayor showed up, they would resume their position as the chair. But if it was gonna be a quick meeting and it's gonna be more disruptive than not, then maybe we just finish it out. But it would be the intention that the mayor or deputy mayor would resume when they arrive. So under 18, F, talking about meeting conduct and having all persons in attendance at the meeting refrain from using any video recording device. Changed it to unless authorized to do so by this bylaw or by the chair. And there was just a little bit of concern last time that was a bit too stringent, particularly, you know, if we had a reporter in the room who wanted to do a recording for their notes. So this just makes it a little less difficult to be able to allow for video recording should we so choose. And then again in 18.1 B, just clarifying that counselors can use their phones, etc. In emergent circumstances. So we all understand that we're all people and might have things going on in our life, can't be completely disconnected all the time, but that the intent is to remain off your phone unless absolutely necessary. And the last big change was under 23.1. When I was going back over it, I felt that the way it was originally worded made it almost mandatory that you propose and vote on amendments to the bylaw, as opposed to that just being an option. So it's just reworded to ensure that it's an option to propose and vote on amendments to a bylaw without a reading. But you could still do a reading as amended. So just trying to clarify that a little bit. Otherwise, that is the end of the page changes, and I would be happy to take any questions.
Any questions?
I do have one.
Yeah.
Just on a term here, what is a question of privilege? It's under 19.0. Would that be maybe if you're speaking on something that should be in camera or something? Is that what that would be?
So under the definitions, W, question of privilege means a request or motion made to the chair unrelated to the business on the floor when a council member believes the comfort, dignity, safety, or reputation of council or a council member is at stake.
Any others? Well, a lot of work. We had a good discussion last week as well. So thank you for all of that, Ms. Parsons, and if there's no questions, maybe someone would move us along. Counselor Good?
I'll move the council give first reading to bylaw number 2174, meeting procedures bylaw.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Clarification needed? Okay, everyone understands the motion? All of those, all in favor? It is carried. Thank you, Ms. Parsons. So the timeline for this to come back, through second and so on,
I would think next meeting.
okay, thank you. And Ms. Modi is now. Oops, we have no unfinished business, and Ms. Modi is under new business, land use bylaw refresh.
Thank you. I'm just pulling up the report. All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you. I am here to present what we heard report for the land use bylaw for the consultation that we have been doing since February, since the draft was presented to council. The actual report unfortunately was not attached to the council agenda, so I will go through it a little bit more slowly as you guys did not have the opportunity to take this outside in the sun and have a good read of it over the weekend. Overall, this report is prepared based on the feedback we've been receiving since February 3rd. We have conducted a specific survey and we'll go over the responses to those specific questions. But in general, we've also been providing feedback or providing opportunities for awareness to the public to try and raise awareness around the project. So we have had the draft bylaw on our project webpage that launched right after it was presented to council in February. We did hold an open house on February 19th. And we've also had information tabled at the farmers market on February 22nd, the spring parade of programs on April 3rd, and also had information at the trade show on April 25th and 26th. We did also send a direct email to some local builders, developers, and real estate agents to try and raise awareness amongst the community that would come into contact with the land use bylaw on a more regular basis. The survey itself was launched on the week of February 10th, and we've also reviewed the draft bylaw with the Municipal Planning Commission over a series of meetings. In the back of the report, what you will find the schedules, which include a schedule that shows some of the advertising that we've done about the project. So that would be on our webpage, on the Facebook page, and then also the utility insert for February had information about the fact that the project existed and where people could go and find that draft, and that there was a survey coming up very shortly. In addition to that, there is an insert, or not an insert, that's the wrong word, but an information sheet that we did start handing out that highlighted some of the big changes that are also highlighted on the survey itself. And then the complete survey results are provided for council. So the report highlights the changes and it highlights some of the questions where we've given a bit of an additional bit of feedback based on some commentary that was received. But the survey responses as a whole are presented for council to take a look at in their more raw form as well. And then we did receive a couple bits of written feedback. So we've also attached those in Schedule D, at the back of the report. Is everybody able to see it sufficiently? Should I be zooming in? Make it more legible.
I think we've got it on our.
You got it on your agenda? Okay, excellent. So in terms of the survey itself, there were 19 questions related to the content of the draft, as well as some demographic questions. We received 66 responses where people went through kind of the entire survey. 82 people did start it. The majority of the questions provided a response scale of strongly agree, neither, disagree, strongly disagree, and no opinion. And we asked some very specific questions related to some of the big changes for the bylaw. So, we erred on the side of some fairly detailed questions. So you'll see as we go through the questions that some of them are quite long. That's because we're trying to give both an understanding of what the change is and why we're proposing to make the change before we ask people if they agreed or disagreed with that change. For the most part, the changes that were highlighted received very broad support. Over 70% were agree or strongly agree. There were a few questions where the levels of support definitely were a bit lower. Specifically, those related to storage containers, landscaping, and parking were where there was a little bit less agreement across the responses. The lowest level of support was in the landscaping question, where only 52.24% of respondents strongly agreed with the question. And that was also the question with the highest level of active disagreement. So a lot of other questions, there might have been more people who either neither agreed or disagreed, or they didn't have an opinion. But the highest level of disagreement was there with 41.7%. So there was some actual split in the opinion of the community. So going through the questions, question 1 related to the big changes to the residential districts, because that is likely the land use districts that's going to affect the broadest number of survey respondents. And we are making some big changes there in terms of what's allowed in the R1 district. So we're consolidating a lot of lands in this bylaw, and we're adding uses that are allowed as a permitted use. So it's not just single detached anymore, it's now single detached, duplexes, and accessory homes are all considered permitted. So we have, in this case, there was a lot of support. So 41 plus 39, so about 80% of the respondents either agreed or strongly agreed with that response. So definitely strong support there. Most of the comments related to this question were about our ability for the infrastructure to accommodate suites, and making sure that we have strong development and building permitting processes so that development does have adequate parking, and we're minimizing overcrowding and fire risks by actually having strong permitting processes. So we're not having illegal suites in the community. And really by putting the uses in this district, we are giving ourselves the ability to then require people to go through those processes while still having the option to say yes. Councillor Shannon, I see that question.
Are you talking about like if you want to put a suite in your, like a grandmother's suite or whatever you want to call it, or a basement, if you want to turn your basement into like a separate unit, that would be where you have to get the permitting? Is that what?
Correct, yeah.
Right, okay.
So based on the responses that we've seen, we don't recommend any changes to the approach in the land use bylaw for this, because the survey respondents seem to be quite pleased overall with that. With it.
Yeah.
My math.
So, just to be clear, there's an empty lot next door to somebody's house. And it's in the R1 district under this, and so they could see a duplex go up there, or a single family, anything like that. Right.
Yeah, a duplex, a single family with an accessory dwelling unit, or depending on the way the land use bylaw is written, it could also be up to a single family with a basement suite and say a separated garden suite in the backyard. That could be possible if it's on a property that has rear lane access as well. So there is access to the property on two sides, which is a portion of our community, but by no means all of it. There's lots of areas where there is no lane. Thanks. Any other questions related to that? All right, the next question was related to changes to creating the R6 district. So R6 is the district that we have created to specifically deal with lots, residential lands that are not connected to our municipal infrastructure. We do have some areas of town where that is the case, and where we might want to have some additional flexibility. The lots are generally bigger. There might be some uses that are appropriate there that are not appropriate in our more traditional urban residential neighborhoods. So we've created that change to give us the options to treat those lands a little bit differently. And again, there was overall support for the change. There were definitely some comments related to the cost of taxes for those properties and the town providing services to unserviced areas. I'm not surprised by any of those comments, but they don't really affect the approach within the land use bylaw. Those are questions for different conversations, essentially. Any questions related to that? Then we went on to the Main Street overlay. So this is an overlay that affects property along Main Street, basically from the mall up to the traffic circle. And it has some additional requirements, regulations related to building that come from the 2009 Tourism and Downtown Enhancement Report. I'm not saying the name exactly right, but it is that report. And one of the key changes that we've made in the draft bylaw is lowering the minimum requirements. That overlay, to be clear, that overlay exists in our land use bylaw today. We've tried to improve it by making the regulations clearer, making sure that they are consistent with what the recommendations of that report. But one change that we have put into the draft is lowering the requirement for the building height. So today, the overlay requires that a building is built to a 2-story height within that area. Which means that if you are looking only to build 1 story, and you don't want to go higher, then the answer to your development proposal is no. So we have lowered the minimum requirement to 1.5 stories 1.5 story front or facade, which will allow a 1-story development along Main Street, as long as they have a 1.5 story facade, which is about 6 meters. A lot of commercial buildings these days are kind of coming at that range anyway. So it makes it the bar to development or redevelopment along Main Street a little bit lower. And that's because we have seen a number of properties sit on Main Street over the last number of decades, and we want to try and facilitate that redevelopment. So we definitely had broad support. There was a good amount of comments related to this change. Some people were very much in favor of it. Others wanted to stick to the plan and thought that it provides a better urban environment to have a higher building along Main Street, and that there were good reasons to maintain it. So the comments were kind of seeing both sides, but overall, if you look at the raw survey responses, there is broad support for that change. So we would recommend maintaining it. Yes, Councillor Shannon.
Is there a height maximum?
I believe so. But I don't have it off the top of my head. If it does exist, I'm going to say it's within the range of about 4 stories. All right, so the next questions all have to do with when a development permit is required or not required. And we have made some substantial changes in this bylaw to circumstances where a development permit wouldn't be required. One of the big ones is a change of use within a commercial or an industrial building from a permitted to a discretionary use within that land use bylaw or within that land use district. And so basically, for instance, today, if you want to go from a retail store to a restaurant on Main Street, a development permit is required. This change to the land use bylaw would mean that, as those are both permitted uses within our commercial district, if you're in a commercial building, then that use does not require a development permit. So that's just lowering the amount of processes that a building or a business would have to go through to make that change. They still do require a change of occupancy building permit, but the development permit would not be required. So there was strong support for this as well. And overall, the comments were also supportive. So the recommendation is to proceed with that. Similar home-based business, home office, we are separately defining that in this new bylaw, and we are identifying it as a circumstance where someone does not require a development permit. This is probably, I think, the response that had the best or the highest level of support. Whoever's controlling this is one button. There we go. So there was, I don't think, anybody who strongly disagreed in this circumstance. And it was high, lots of agreement, so we definitely recommend maintaining this direction. We have also, we have 3 categories now in the draft bylaw for home-based business. There's also home-based business minor, which does allow for some business-related visits to a home. So if someone had a massage therapy business or was teaching music lessons or something like that, that would probably fall within the minor home occupation or home-based business use. And within the draft land use bylaw right now, that also does not require a development permit. So it's only when you get to having a home-based business that we would classify as major, that we would require a development permit to have that business in that location. There are a few comments related to concerns about traffic and on-street parking requirements, and that some areas could become congested and on-street parking would be less available. But overall, as you can see, there was still strong support for this change. So based on that, the recommendation is to continue with this change in the bylaw. Any questions? Okay. All right. Continuing on the theme of when a development permit would not be required.
Okay.
Sorry.
Isn't that one graph where you have the, 4 point, graph where you, and that last one on the home-based business, you have the 4.29, you have questions or suggestions relating. That adds up to the 100%, but it doesn't really tell you in the graph whether they agreed or disagreed. They just had a comment, so. It's not really as clear, like, most time when they disagree, you can tell, or agree, they tell. That doesn't really give you that information. I didn't see any others where I noticed the blue.
There, full confession, there are 2 questions where the response unfortunately was formatted like that. Wasn't intentional. It was
Oh, okay.
just how that happened in the survey. If you go to those questions, you will, those are the people that did provide a comment on those 2 questions. They had to click that to put in a response. There is a, if that did create an issue for anybody, the last question of the survey did provide a general open response opportunity to provide any other comment.
Yeah, I don't really have a problem with it. It's just if you're looking at the graph, it's
Yeah.
just you agree and the graph doesn't tell you. That's
Yeah.
it.
100%, that is a fair observation, yeah. But if you go to the questions, some of them, the comment is that it's fantastic. Others are concerned that there would be an issue, so.
Right.
Okay, so moving on to commercial patios. So this is another circumstance where we would not require a development permit. So this, we do have temporary outdoor patio and retail space guidelines today. They've been a pilot project that was put in place since COVID. And the intention has always been to integrate them into the land use bylaw. So in this circumstance, if you're developing a patio on private property, you would not require a development permit as long as you're following what will become a policy. We intend to bring that forward to council, but it will be largely based on what's already in place today in that pilot project. So we don't foresee a lot of changes to what's been operational within the community since 2021. There were a few concerns about accessibility and congestion. The guidelines are specific in terms of how, or that accessibility both to the patio and around the patio is required. So I think some of those concerns are addressed in the guidelines that would need to be followed in any case. We would continue to support keeping this in the bylaw. Another change is around the requirement for a development permit related to solar panels. So here again, very broad support for this change. There were a couple of questions related to the potential concern for glare off of solar panels. Based on my research, there is some potential for some glare going off of solar panels, but a lot of solar panels have a lot less glare than you would expect, and it cannot be at a very specific time of day. And frankly, I don't think that we would necessarily capture that within the development permit process anyway. So I don't think that that's a reason to not proceed, and overall, there is strong support for this change. And there also has been, we do have some solar panels in town, and there has been very little negative feedback to anybody who has had to live next to a residential property, which is primarily most of them, that has solar panels. And this is specifically related to building mounted, so we're talking about panels you're putting up in the same way that a window might have glare, a solar panel might have glare as well. All right. Update to the fence regulations. Here we are actually establishing fence height maximums. Our current bylaw establishes when a permit is required relative to putting up a fence, but it doesn't actually establish a maximum. So someone could ask to put up a 10-meter fence. Technically, we don't have the authority to say no to that. So this does establish those maximums. There was a little bit of confusion with why we needed to put this into the bylaw, because we already have it in the bylaw, but we don't actually have that maximum in the bylaw. So adding it makes a lot of sense. And I think that this was an opportunity to kind of educate as well around that need. But we do recommend proceeding with that change. So storage containers are the next. And this is one where we have proposed in the draft bylaw to allow storage containers in a broader area of the community, including in the commercial areas. We've set a maximum of 2 storage containers on a property in the downtown as the current maximum. And this is one where there was a little bit less full agreement. There still wasn't a lot of disagreement. A greater number of the participants either neither agreed or disagreed, or they did not have an opinion. But we have also had some conversation around this at MPC. And so there is a question to council around this, whether 2 storage containers in particular in the downtown area is too much for individual properties. If one is perhaps the more appropriate maximum. So we would appreciate some feedback on that as we work to finalize the bylaw. And I'll just also highlight here within the report, the call out box with the orange around it, that is the responses from our 2018 survey, where we asked about shipping containers being acceptable storage buildings in the commercial areas of town. So there was a majority support for that idea back in 2018. And now that we've made the change, I think support has grown slightly, and the level of disagreement has gone down a little bit. So it seems that we're headed on the right track, but there still is a question of what's the right amount in our areas with smaller commercial tracts of land. All right, so the next question is the one around landscaping requirements. So we did highlight in the question some of the key landscaping requirements that are established in the new bylaw. In particular, we highlighted that this proposes that for residential lots, your single family home, duplex lots, etc., at least 1 tree in the front yard is the minimum that's established by this new bylaw. And then also for industrial, commercial, and multi-unit apartments, there's a requirement for at least 1 tree per 120 meters squared and 1 shrub for every 30 meters squared of required setback. So that's not the parcel in its size in its entirety, but it's the setback requirement area. So if you're dealing with a front yard in a standard property, you would have today at 7.62 meters of required front yard setback. So it's that area that's plus the side yards and the rear yard. That's what's driving the requirement for the residential, or sorry, for the landscaping for commercial, industrial, and multi-unit apartments. Councilor Shannon, question.
So why do you insist that I just want to understand the logic behind that. Why do you insist there's this 1 tree? And just explain that a little bit, please.
So the rationale behind the tree, in part, it's because when we did the survey in 2018, there was strong support to have more landscaping requirements in town. It makes, it sets a requirement so that developers have to provide some landscaping for residential. It creates shade, a better urban environment. There's lots of reasons why. It's also, I think, consistent with council strategic direction around having an environment that people want to live. That being said, the results of this question did show a divide. There was a little over 50% who were strongly supportive, and then for the ones that are disagreeing, which is over 40%, the majority of the comments in this question were questioning the 1 tree requirement specifically. So, and fair enough, we have thought about some alternate approaches to this to meet in the middle in terms of having a landscaping requirement, but not being quite so prescriptive about it. And also recognizing that there are some circumstances where it may be difficult to provide or difficult from a practical sense. So some of the alternate approaches that we've identified is having some flexibility. So it's either 1 tree per dwelling in the front or the rear yard. So you choose location. It could be 1 tree or 2 shrubs so that you're not bound to a tree, but you are bound to some kind of landscaping. We could also look at putting in a waiver in the land use bylaw so that if the servicing to the house, like the actual service line, doesn't allow for a minimum distance from that service line and the service lines on either side, that a tree would not be required. So that we're not requiring people to install some landscaping where that might turn into a utility issue in the future. And also perhaps only requiring this if we're dealing with spec homes, i.e. homes that are built by a developer, not built by a builder owner who's intending to live in that property. So some different options, ways of tackling it while still having a landscaping requirement. And that's definitely something where we would like some direction from council. But also I will say, in following up and looking at this requirement and kind of looking across the spectrum of practice that's out there, the requirement for a tree in the front yard or some sort of landscaping related to single detached is not unusual. You know, Grand Prairie, Drumheller, Slave Lake, White Court, these are all places where this is typical and I think are reasonable comparators to our community or where we would like to head.
It's a question that just came to mind, because a lot of times if you're building a house, you put in your lawn first. However you do that, and you really don't want to be putting a tree and then putting your lawn around it. So if you're building, would there be something like a time frame put in that, for example, you build this year, you may have to have the lawn in within a year to 2 years, and then the tree in within 3 to 5 kind of thing, allowing for some thought to go into it, or the shrubbery or whatever. Because most of the neighborhoods that you go to, you see that most places do have some kind of landscaping after a while. But when they're first put in, they're usually, it's the lawn, and then the house that people develop over time. So I'm just thinking that might be a way of making it kind of easier and allowing people to kind of do it. Because if you're saying you're gonna build the house to have it in, the house open January 1st, you have to have the tree and the shrubs in by May, well, that can be a little onerous.
Yeah, typically there would be a timeline for landscaping after the building is complete and after the major construction on the site is complete. You're gonna do your landscaping and your finishing work towards the end.
Regarding the trees, is it specific trees and specific size that has to be? I know the town had that. Are they staying with that?
I think you might also be thinking about the boulevard tree policy. So in terms of size, I do believe there is a size requirement, so we're not accepting like little trees. But not a specific species. That becomes more up to the developer and or property owner as to what they would prefer. Any other? No, okay, moving on. All right, the next change relates to some recreational vehicle maximum parking or parking requirements establishing in this bylaw. So this is new to this land use bylaw. And it establishes a maximum number of recreational vehicles. So here we're talking about RV units. This doesn't hit boats or ATVs, that sort of thing. It is specifically a recreational vehicle that you could live in, camp in. And the draft bylaw sets a maximum of 2 RVs that may be parked on the residential site. And the RVs must not be stored in the required parking stall. So that means typically our individual homes require 2 parking stalls per house. So if the RV was parked in one, and as a result, we had a vehicle that was consistently parked on the street, that would be in contravention of this requirement. They must be parked fully on the private property, in the side yard, the rear yard, or a driveway. So you can't park it on your grassed front yard. That's also contravention of this requirement. And they must be parked 0.6 meters back from the sidewalk, curb, or laneway. So the intent here is to try and maintain the residential character of neighborhood and ensure that RVs are not blocking sidewalks, roads, or laneways.
0.6 meters,
0.6, yes,
like 1.5 feet, okay?
yes.
Okay.
So adding these new parking requirements was still majority in favor of the change, but obviously there was about 17% of people who disagreed with it, and then a greater degree of people who either didn't have an opinion or were kind of not sure how they felt. There were some comments related, or some people felt that 2 was too many RVs in residential areas. And there was also definitely some confusion around the 2 parking stall requirement or parking within the required parking stalls. So I think a little bit of tweaking of the language to provide some added clarity is probably a good idea for this. And based on the responses, we would definitely appreciate some feedback from council about the number of parking or RVs that would be appropriate in a residential district. Is 2 the correct number, or is 1 sufficient for these sites?
And if it's parked on the street, there's a maximum time frame for that
3 days.
situation, right?
Yeah, so that circumstance is related to the traffic and street bylaw. So this is dealing with RV parking on private property, whereas that other bylaw deals with RV parking on the street, and it is limited.
So it could be parked on the private land for the year. Okay, thanks. Councillor Good, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm just unsure of the difference between neither and no opinion.
Mhm.
Because I think they're the same. So I'm just curious as to what information that actually, again, going back to almost the blue thing, what information that gives you, because if a person neither agrees nor disagree, they kind of don't have an opinion. Just for future, I'm just not sure what is the distinction without a difference? I'm not sure, but unless you in the questions define what neither means and what no opinion means.
I'll take that note for future.
Thanks.
Any other questions on the 1 or 2? It's kind of one of the key points of this question, right?
Yes, it is.
Any other thoughts?
I didn't think that the number for agreeing would be, the 2 would be actually that high, so it seems to be the will of the people, and combined with those that either say neither or don't care, assuming that they might be potentially the same group, it's like we're moving, it looks like that's what people want.
The next question highlighted changes to the minimum parking requirements in the downtown. So specifically, we have proposed to remove the minimum parking requirements for any building that's fronting along 99, 101, and 100th Street as shown in the diagram that's just to the next to it. For all uses in the downtown except for things that are any dwelling units or any hotels. And we're doing this because we do have a lot of parking in the downtown that's available, public parking, that could be utilized. And we have also, the MPC has been varying parking requirements consistently along Main Street over the last number of years. And we haven't seen any major ramifications from that. Having a parking requirement as part of a change of use where you have an existing development can substantially hinder the redevelopment ability of a property and limit its options. So we've highlighted those changes and very broad or positive support for this. We have a few people who strongly disagreed at all with this change. So based on that, we did have some questions related to ensuring adequate parking for people with disabilities and making it clear where our public parking lots are. But other than that, based on the change or the comments, so we definitely recommend to maintain this direction. The question after that was related to on-street parking and including that within parking requirements. So the draft bylaw proposes to allow on-street parking that is for public or commercial uses. So in front of, specifically in front of a property that is a public or commercial use, to be included within the parking requirement for that use. And we've been doing this in the downtown for a long time, but there are other areas of town where there are public parking and a public use. For instance, the Pool Baytex, that block is surrounded by parking. In principle, that parking would not be allowed to be counted towards the meeting the minimum parking requirements for those facilities. So this would allow us to do that while still following the land use bylaw. So there was broad support for this and very little disagreement. So based on that, we would recommend continuing on with this direction. The next question was related to bike parking requirements. We do establish bike parking requirements for apartment, commercial, and public uses where there's also on-site parking provided. So where there is a parking lot that's a part of that development. The draft bylaw requires 1 bike parking stall for every 4 dwelling units for an apartment and 1 bike parking space for every 20 vehicle stalls for a commercial or a public use. And there's a minimum of 2 parking stalls, which is 1 bike rack like you would see out on the sidewalk in front of the town office.
Those are good.
I'm agreeing with the intent.
Yeah.
But for clarity, it should probably have a comma after public uses.
Hmm.
And then put where, because you could say it was per apartments, commercial uses, and public uses where you need this, so I think you need the. Is there an Oxford comma, is it? I'm not sure what it is. We should have a comma there.
All right. Thank you for that note. So this also did have strong support. About 15% of people disagreed, but overall, we do recommend maintaining this requirement. And most of the comments were really complaining about bike theft within the community, and so arguably providing more places to securely store your bike as you go about the community would help address that issue. The next question related to changes to how we notify the public. So here first I'll highlight, so we have proposed changes, significant changes to how we'll notify the public within the bylaw. We propose to notify via mail directly adjacent property owners and the surrounding neighborhood as appropriate for permits for discretionary uses, variances, and direct control applications before a decision is made, giving people a chance to give us feedback. And then after a decision, those results will be posted on the town's website. Permits for permitted uses would not be they would be listed on the website, but they would not be specifically posted because there's really limited ability to appeal and the value therefore becomes minimum. We did this in part because of the preference expressed by the community when we asked about how they would prefer to be notified back in our 2018 land use bylaw survey. And there was a strong majority who preferred a mailed letter as their preferred option. And then the local newspaper and posted on site, some of those things that we might have been doing before are less popular. So we did have overall agreement to this change, but we did have a few comments. I think, you know, change is always hard, and there were some people who I expressed the desire to maintain the posted signs or the signs that are posted on site. And one commenter who did express a concern related to the notification process slowing things down, but overall, there was support for this, so we would recommend maintaining this direction.
So the signs would be put out or would not be put out?
The signs would not be put out. We would be moving away from that. We would be notifying adjacent property owners.
But
Where there's a difference between a property owner and a property occupant, we would be mailing both those people.
and the adjacent part is what diameter or what distance?
So the language in the bylaw is surrounding, specifically to give ourselves a little bit more flexibility, because adjacent is specifically defined in the MGA, and that is very specifically the properties that are immediately around it. They can be separated by a road, by rail, by the river, but
Not by
It's-
another house.
exactly, if you're 2 houses away, in that case, you would not technically be adjacent to that property. So we've used slightly different language because there are circumstances where we would want to choose to go beyond that adjacent landowner.
Councilor Good?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you might want to have more than one method rather than just mailing.
Mhm.
This doesn't really specify, I know it may specify later, but if I know a lot of people don't get their mail now any more than once every month or 2 months, and 2019 is a long time ago,
Fair enough.
the way technology has changed.
Mhm.
So I would think that putting it up on the website is like really easy, so it's not a real position. Mailing the letter, if you're doing it, that's fairly easy because you have the addresses. You have email addresses for most people.
That's
That's the area that's a little touchy, right?
Yeah.
So I think if you did mail anywhere there's time you have an address, emailed when you have the email, when you have an email address and on the website, you're kind of covering most people's
Mhm.
And I don't think it's an owner's requirement if you have the information and put in the caveat, if you've given us your email, fine, we'll do it, but we're not gonna chase you for it. So anyways, it's just my thoughts.
Related to that question, we did also follow up and ask people how long they felt should be required, or how much notice would be needed, and there was a desire for quite a bit of notice. That would, if we were to follow with the majority here, would increase timelines, and so we are reticent to do that. But the advantage of the approach that we're pursuing is that we would be notifying people before we even make the decision. So if they receive the notification and they have the opportunity to provide feedback before either administration or the NPC is making a decision, that can be incorporated into the decision. If they receive it afterwards, there still is the appeal period that we cannot get away from because that's mandated by the MGA. So they would have received that information about the permit going forward. They would know where to go look to see what the decision was. And then if they felt the need to appeal, that's still an option that's available to them. So our proposal is to may have a minimum of 5 days notice be included in the land use bylaw, which is the lower end of what we've proposed on this scale. But that still does make sure that more people are aware of it, and the notice would give them their alternate options if they have missed the timeline related to a discretionary decision by the NPC or the development officer.
So when does would the 5 days start?
essentially, administration would set the start, and then the decision would not be issued until that timeline had passed.
Yeah, okay. Thanks.
And then the last question, in the survey about the land use bylaw was highlighting the new assessment criteria that are in the bylaw. That provide the town, guide us on what information we might need when we're dealing with a discretionary use application, what type of requirements we might want to consider, and how we should assess impacts. And overall, there was support for this change and minimal, disagreement. So based on that, we would recommend continuing with this in the land use bylaw. Question 19 was just the open-ended question. If anybody had any additional feedback to provide. When it comes to who responded to the survey, so the majority of people who responded were residents. I think we had 2 responses from outside of town, but they were, I think, property owners. They indicated in their comment that they did own property. We had relatively good distribution across the community. So the north end, south end, Strasbourg Estates, Saddleback, Lower West Peace, Upper West Peace, all represented in the survey responses. Age distribution, we did have a broad number. We didn't have the very young. Nobody who was under 20 opted into participating in the survey. So we were overrepresented from 35 to 44-year-olds and 50 to 59-year-olds in particular. And then the majority of respondents do own their home or own their home. A little over a quarter also owned land or building in town other than their home, and a little over a quarter owned or operate a business in the town. So then this next section of the report is where we specifically provided some clarification. So there were lots of good substantive comments within the survey responses. And so we have pulled out some of those and provided specific responses to address those. In the interest of time, I'll ask council how much you want me to go over here, or if you would like to be able to read these out of yourselves.
Are we wanting to read these ourselves?
Yeah.
Fair enough.
It's a big document.
Yeah.
Okay, apparently we're reading it ourselves.
Okay. So overall, these are just further clarifications, and it was a good opportunity. And we'll be working, I think, to highlight some of that as we move forward with Stuart and their communications. So overall, I'll just highlight for council that we would appreciate in particular any direction that council can provide on where you'd like to go, particularly related to the RV parking, the storage containers, and the landscaping requirements. We definitely recommend maintaining a landscaping requirement. Doesn't necessarily have to look exactly as it does in the draft today. So we'd like to make it right for the town of Peace River. In terms of next steps, we are now working on bringing forward the draft, or not the draft. We're updating the draft to bring it forward to council for first reading. We're incorporating changes related to the comments that we received from the MPC, from the public, from the survey itself, and as well as a legal review and just some additional staff review where we've noticed something that does need to be tweaked. So there will be a changes version coming forward to council for you to see, as well as the draft for the document for first reading. Once we get through first reading, we'll do our legislative advertising and hold that public hearing. And there will be an opportunity for further changes if some are required. And then hopefully we'll be presenting the new bylaw to council for second and third reading definitely before the election, but in the not so distant future. If you do have any other comments or questions related to the bylaw, I'm happy to discuss those now as well, not just the things related to the survey.
Councilors, any thoughts that come to mind at this point? So you would come back to us and we would for sure have the discussion about storage containers, landscaping, and RV parking vehicles. Okay, anything else that comes to mind, I guess, but those three in particular. Okay, counselors, any further questions as to process or where we're going here? This? Well, it's a major project, years long, isn't it? And, I think it looks like it's, coming into the modern way of dealing with things, especially parking. And our parking circumstances might be a little different than another town without so many public parking parts, I guess you'd say. Okay, yes, so I guess we're done here then. We'll make a motion to bring it back, but I think we will, yeah. Anybody have any last minute questions on this point? Okay.
I move that council direct administration to amend the draft land use bylaw based on discussion at this meeting and further direct administration to return the draft land use bylaw to the future council meeting for consideration of first reading.
Thank you. Any further discussion about the motion? Everybody's clear on it? Okay, so just all those in favor? It is carried. Thank you, Ms. Modi, and thank you for future work on this same topic.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have the Arbo Revitalization Society request to install power at the, I can't say this word name, Arboretum. Mrs. Bell.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report before council this evening is sort of an information item, a good news story as it were, that we wanted to make council aware of. And doesn't require council's action at this time. Administration is addressing the request at an operational level. Excuse me. The group that sort of started this initiative back in the 90s, some members of the group have reinitiated or reinvigorated themselves and are looking at reinvesting back at the site, which is great news because it hasn't really received a lot of attention and love probably for at least approximately 10 years. We have recently met with the group, myself and CAO Miller, to get a better understanding outside of the request for power. What was the group intending? What were they looking at? What was their long-term vision? Their plans for the site? Because we need to get a better understanding and sense of sort of the bigger picture. So they indicated to us that they are looking at infrastructure improvements such as the existing signage on the site is seen better days and a lot of it is falling apart. They're looking at a new QR code style of sign, identifying the species of each tree and shrub on site. So upgrading a lot of that species identification information, potentially new plantings, maybe some new trees. The space may dictate some of that. And continuation of some forestry education, which has been ongoing through the provincial government for quite some time. The group is not a registered society, though they've labeled themselves as such. So we just wanted that clarification also to get a better understanding of what organizationally we were looking at. So our next steps with the group, one, we've given authority for them to chat with ATCO and explore what options are around adding power, because it's never as simple as we all hope it's going to be. But so that is underway, and we're also developing a formal memorandum of understanding. There wasn't anything in place in our records of this informal organization. There was some general information, but not a lot of detail. For example, the town, excuse me, we cut the grass, we pay for the water, where the irrigation is all town responsibility, but the tree maintenance was always a question. So what we're identifying is that we would put together a proper memorandum of understanding to have very clear roles and responsibilities for each party, so there isn't confusion going forward any longer. And the town would maintain its existing site maintenance site maintenance responsibilities. And insurance, because it's town property, so therefore, that is part of the town's responsibility. I believe there might be a question.
Counselor Good?
Yeah, the only difficulty I have without them being a society is that they can't enter into an agreement. They can't enter into any binding agreement at all. And if they did, there's liability on them as individuals because they wouldn't have the protections of the Societies Act or the Corporations Act. So I'm not sure that they understand the ramifications, and I'm not sure that how we can enter into an agreement of responsibilities when there's no party that can agree on behalf of the other members, because you can't agree on my behalf,
Correct.
even though we're in the same clubhouse.
We're in a club. We'll talk about that.
That's where I have some confusion.
Yeah, and this would be a memorandum of understanding with the individuals. So,
One individual.
more than one potentially, yes.
Okay, would you spell out the responsibility? This individual is
Correct.
responsible for this and this individual is
Correct.
responsible for this?
There are some members who are also there on behalf of other organizations, and provincial entities per se.
Yeah,
So
I think
they-
you want some clarification on their structure, and I'm just.
Yeah.
Yeah, this gives me the willies when there's nobody there.
I don't disagree with you, hence why we initiated the meeting with the group to get a better understanding of, are we a collective of individuals? Are we a society? What is your plan? So once we move towards having the more in-depth conversation around any sort of formal agreement, because there's a quite a number of factors, though I lay out some of the potential aspects to it. For example, we currently book the site through our booking, standardized booking system through our recreational services. That needs to maintain going forward. So if that organization or group or committee, as it were, excuse me, would like to host an event on site, technically they'll need to book it through us. Because we also book weddings at the location, we book other activities. And I would hate for anyone to have a mishap of assuming site is available for party A, but in fact, it's already been committed to party B. So something so simple can actually become quite complex, unintentionally. So hence why the importance of having some arrangement of some sort, whatever that looks like in the end, as we move through the process, whether it's an MOU, whether it's with individuals, or they pursue becoming a society, if that's the choice they end up making going down the road. But the importance of documentation and clarity for roles and responsibilities. There's a significant issue around health and safety and tree maintenance on the site. It's just a reality of what we have to deal with when it's the town's insurance and it's our risk management we have to address, so.
Counselor Shannon?
How did they operate before, when they first were organized?
Very similarly, informally, there seemed to be a partnership in the 90s, specifically around forestry capital, whatever that process would have looked like, and the town had been involved in some format. But there was never a formalized arrangement put in place, and it seems to have been very informal going forward after the park had been unveiled or opened or whatever the case was. This is pre my time, believe it or not. And I've been here a while, and this was definitely before we were involved. We were very uncertain of how it all came to be. So we got a little bit more history at that meeting, because quite frankly, I didn't have a lot of documented history.
It will be nice to see it refurbished, though. I remember
Yeah.
going there, when Jackson was in school, and like,
Yeah.
they did have a really great purpose.
Yeah.
So to see it used again will be nice.
Yeah. Absolutely. So the group is very interested in pursuing power installation at the site. They have committed to all costs related to the capital infrastructure, and that some of the beginning conversations that they're having with ATCO. Again, it's really going to depend on the potential power use and what's available on the existing, I believe, transformer in that area, whether ATCO can expand or if they have to look at additional power. I don't know if it'd be another transformer that's ATCO's world, what that might look like. So they're in exploratory phase of that component of it. But we are looking at adding it as part of the operational, existing operational budget for parks. It's a fairly insignificant amount that we would anticipate for general operating costs of adding power to a location. That's all I have.
So yes, my question, we're trying to change, it sounds like good. I was wondering like
Excuse me.
who the contact's gonna be, like who speaks for the group sort of thing. Cause over time, our experience has been that it's kind of wise, as you said, to lay out as much as you can. And rather than having to do things in hindsight. So, and you know, I would wonder too, from what you've said, it's much easier to deal with the formal society than sort of a committee of people who, well, they find the roles within themselves, I guess, but just kind of easier. And I worry about the insurance too. If they're a group, like, you know, societies, they get director's insurance for,
Yeah.
you know, coverage of odds and ends these days. But good opportunity to revitalize some of the trees and so on there, just as we talked about planting trees in yards. Well, we want them in the park too, right? But any other questions, discussion on this one? Yes, Mr. Stemmerman?
So if they are, you know, managing the property. And someone, you know, climbs a ladder unadvisedly or otherwise and takes a header off the thing, as bad as that course situation is for that individual. Does that impact the town's insurance? That's a claim on our situation, like.
Technically, it would be, it would fall under our WCB, depending on the arrangement, if there was a pre-arrangement where that was clarified. But it could definitely impact us, both insurance and WCB coverage, because the volunteers automatically fall under our health and safety program if they don't have their own, or if we don't have a formal agreement in place where their coverage is separate from the town of Peace Rivers. This is where things in 2025, things get a little bit more complicated, unfortunately.
Councilor Scammon?
So I noticed one of the members has it seems to be a property care sort of company. Is that something that they potentially could right under that insurance or
Correct.
something of that regard?
So,
And your memorandum of understanding
exactly.
that no one can actually sign.
But they can if they're, for example, if you're a provincial employee, if the province chooses to sign an MOU, then that individual or individuals, depending on who would be involved, they would definitely have coverage under that arrangement. Same with a private business owner. Exactly the same thing. They would just sign their own agreement, which then covers themselves and or any employees that they have. So there's lots of ways for us to address this. And we will continue to work with the group to make sure we find the most agreeable to all parties. And it might be multiple agreements, which is perfectly fine. I'm happy to sign 10 if we need to.
Yeah.
It's again, just that clear documentation and understanding, and it's truly the understanding of what it means when you're signing an agreement, the coverage, the insurance piece of it, and yeah. So we'll work with them to see what options we could develop.
And as you say, documentation, so when the new person takes over in any which role, they know the expectation.
Correct.
Good. Wow. Well, good for the group to get energized. Okay, any further questions on this one? Would someone care to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll move council accept the briefing note regarding the Arbor Revitalization Society's request to install power at the Arboretum for information.
Thank you. Is everyone clear on the motion? All in favor? It is carried. Thank you, Ms. Mel. Okay, do we want a little bit of a break at this point in time?
So you can sanitize.
Apparently. Okay, so next up, we have Mr. Mugford, who's going to tell us about the 3-year financial review.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Ford's words of encouragement will push through. So good evening. I'm presenting some highlights or highlighting some changes from the town has underwent from a financial perspective over the past 3 years. So we picked this period of time just because our council was elected in October of 2021. So you didn't really have all that much influence over 2021's financial results, but you did from there until, I guess, present day, the 2024 financials, which were approved in April. So that's the comparable period that we're going to be using. And the following slides highlight certain extracts that were taken from the 2024 audited consolidated financial statements and the 2021 restated audited consolidated financial statements. So I went into our 2022 and used the 2021 restated column because, again, it's going to best reflect the state of the financials at that point in time. And the elements that I selected to highlight, it's really just to show the overall performance of the organization. So I'll start with the statement of financial position, and again, it's comparing our 2024 versus 2021. I'll go over each of the highlighted elements of the slides, and I'll take any questions that arise. So beginning with financial assets, so I'll highlight that there's a significant increase in our cash position, 96.6% increase from the 2021 balance. Having positive cash balances mean the town's in a stronger position and is able to earn interest versus if you are owing money, then you're paying interest. Also, a drop in the receivables is a really positive thing. So we're more actively collecting our receivables, converting those to cash. Overall, financial assets increased by $4.69 million or 21.2%, which is very positive over a 3-year period. On the financial release side, so starting with deferred revenue is effectively if we receive a grant for future capital spend, usually did start that transaction as cash, but we haven't earned that money until we spend it on the whatever the grant says it's for. So for some things it's more broad, but sometimes it's specifically for specific projects. So you can see that in 2021, we had $10.8 million of deferred revenue, which actually surpassed our cash by $2 million. So we had more owing in terms of deferred liability at the end of 2021 than we had cash on hand. In an extreme example, if we had to repay all those funds at once, we would have a negative cash balance. So by 2024, we've significantly decreased this liability, and this has been done in 2 ways. We improved our reporting process to be eligible to recognize capital revenue on projects which had been completed, and we've also been working through the capital budget process to ensure that we're utilizing those grant dollars as quickly as possible. For long-term debt, I've highlighted that, and on a net level, we reduced our long-term debt, and included in that is obligations under capital leases. We've reduced it by $4.66 million. So starting in 2022, we had about 1.35 million of new issuances of capital debt. So that was including the capital lease on an excavator and 2 debentures, one for fire hydrant project and one for the biosolid handling, which is up in our lagoon in Weberville. And we repaid about 1.9 million. In 2023, the only proceeds, so basically new debt, was related to capital leases that we'd signed previously. So that was for 3 pieces of equipment. And again, we continued to repay our debentures and other loans, and to the tune of about $2.08 million. And in 2023, we had, in 2024, we had no additional debt issued, so no proceeds, but we repaid $1.88 million in debentures, $370,000 in other loans, and $711,000 in capital leases. So got basically to a position in 2024 where we elected to pay off some of our highest interest debt, which is a very positive thing. So on a net basis, as I said, we repaid $4.66 million in debt, or approximately an 18.4% reduction over that period of time. Also, post-closure liability, I highlighted that. We really have no control over this. So post-closure liability is our asset retirement obligation calculation. It's impacted by a couple of different things. So it's impacted by obviously our consolidated portion of Peace Regional Waste Management, but things like interest rates also impact that calculation. So it's one of those things we carry on our financial statements, but we really don't have very much control over. So in summary, for the statement of financial position, our net financial debt decreased from 21,400,000 to just a hair under 5 million. So generally speaking, a municipality wants to be in a net financial asset position where your financial assets exceed your liabilities. Town of Peace River at the end of 2021 was in a negative position, so in a debt position of 21.4 million. That's improved by $16.5 million over that 3-year period. So that's a very, very positive change. It's a massive improvement in the town's overall financial position.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
So in simple terms, we got caught up on some of the grant tracking, I guess you'd say. So is that part of what went into this?
Yeah, there's multiple factors, and I'll get into that a little bit later in terms of what what's contributed to all of it. But in general, that's an element of it is improving our reporting process to be able to recognize that revenue in a more timely fashion. That is a portion of the equation. Paying down long-term debt and not issuing new debt is a portion of it. Collecting your receivables in a more timely fashion is a portion of it. So all of that it's all working in our direction. It's all positive. And just for folks that don't necessarily review public sector accounting standards frequently. So net debt it's a term that's unique to the public sector financial reporting world. It refers to the difference between an entity's financial assets and its liabilities at a specific point in time. Being in a net debt position means that financial assets are insufficient to pay existing liabilities, and future revenues will be required to fund costs incurred from prior years for the delivery of service, investment, capital, and other transactions. By contrast, a net financial asset position may provide opportunities for future services to be financed from existing resources. So when you're in a net debt position, it means that you're going to have to make up that difference at some point in the future through taxation or other revenues or through service level reductions. So moving on to non-financial assets, and I think it's an important slide just to show that over a 3-year period, our tangible capital assets, so that's all of our infrastructure, vehicles, etc., it increased by 0.7%, which isn't very much. And it's important to note that tangible capital assets, we are amortizing our assets every year, so that's going to reduce the balance, and we are spending funds on capital replacement. So on a net basis, we increased it by just under $1 million over that 3-year period. But that's not It's not unusual for municipalities. Typically municipalities will go through periods where you do a major project like Baytex, as an example, Baytex Center, where you spend a lot of money in a short period of time, and then you'll have years where you're paying down that debt and not doing as much on the capital spend side of the equation. Again, this is just kind of your overall summary, big picture of our statement of financial position year over year. Moving on, so this, I handed it out to council. This wasn't included in the initial slide deck, but I thought it was important to include. So this is the statement of operations comparing 2024 to 2021. So for me as an accountant, I generally feel like this is less important than the statement of financial position, but this is often obvious to council and the public. I want to note that this does exclude capital revenue. This is focused just on operations. So normally if you're looking at our statement of operations, the capital revenue would be picked up below where it says annual surplus deficit at the bottom. Now it's a little bit tough to compare these 2 years because there was some changes in accounting practices, different presentation. We changed auditors during that period of time. So it's a little bit challenging to say, you know, one is to the other, but this does show the big picture. Madam Mayor, there's a question from Councillor Shannon.
Councillor Shannon.
I just have a question. Why would public health be with economic development under operating expenses?
I'd have to go back to check what, again, this was before my time, why at the time they did certain groupings the way that they did. But I believe that was just, it was one of the sub-function groupings that we had, and so it was put together that way. So the other thing I want to highlight is that, you know, as I said earlier, our statements for 2024, it's picking up the library, which previously 2021 it didn't, and also we're picking up our share of Peace Regional Waste Management. That hasn't changed, but in 2021 it was kind of a worse year for Peace Regional Waste Management. There was lower activity, so it did kind of drop their revenue numbers a little bit, which means that our share of it dropped. But you'll note that in the 2021 slide, on the right hand of the page, it's its own line item. In 2024, it's included in user fees and sale of goods. So on the revenue side of things, there was a very modest increase in overall municipal requisitions over this period of time. I'll discuss that in detail in the next slide. The increase in user fees by 24 is in large part due to the changes that council put through in 2022 to add to a fixed charge, to move to a fixed rate utility model that is moving us in the direction of ultimately those water, wastewater, solid waste, and storm sewer funds being able to pay for themselves and to achieve that self-liquidization. We'll also note that there was a reduction in government transfers for operating over this period of time, and an overall increase in revenues of $8.6 million or 33.9%. On the expenses side, we increased our expenses by $2.96 million or 10.5% over that 3-year period. So I'll highlight that it's less than Alberta CPI increased during that period, so it's less than inflation. And so in real terms, our expenses have actually dropped during that period of time. And the net difference, so, you know, there's a bunch of little elements that all work together and how we've been able to achieve these positive results. As I mentioned, the landfill, our share of that is doing much better in 2024 than it was in 2021. Administration has been very actively focused on waste minimization and an overall emphasis on prioritizing of spend. So we've been improving our overall operational efficiency, which will provide short-term savings and also long-term savings, depending on the nature of the change in the waste reduction. As I spoke to, we've also been improving our accounting practices. So we recognized our deferred revenue sooner. We recognized inventory on our statement of financial position, which in 2021, previous auditor didn't include that. And we've changed our practice in terms of our accruals and things like that, so. I feel like the quality of the financial statements has improved, and I think council's seen that through just an overall reduction in the number of management letter points and things like that, and issues that we've been encountering. So overall, big picture, in 2021, expenses exceeded revenues by $2.86 million. By 2024, revenues exceed expenses by $2.78 million. So it's a, $5.64 million improvement over that period. Just to do a bit of a deep dive into our net municipal taxation. So this number is how much we collect from our taxpayers, and it excludes all flow through requisitions to other organizations. This is just what comes to the town. So the net municipal taxation increased by 9.03% over a 3-year period. As I mentioned, Alberta CPI during that period was an 11.87% increase. So we increased our requisition by less than inflation. Debt limit. So the debt limit is calculated at 1.5 times revenue and the debt service limit is calculated at 0.25 times its revenue. So incurring debt beyond these limitations requires approval by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. And these thresholds are kind of conservative guidelines used by municipal affairs to identify municipalities that could be at risk if further debt is acquired. So using both metrics, the debt limit unused and the debt servicing limit unused, you can see that there's a very positive change between the two comparables. So again, overall, that means the town's in a stronger financial position to utilize debt efficiently in the future. Whether that means strategically borrowing and rates are favorable, or if there was some type of emergency and you needed to borrow money, we have more capacity without having to go to municipal affairs to ask for an exemption. Surplus deficit. So accumulated surplus position means net resources, so both financial and non-financial, are available that may be used to provide future services. An accumulated deficit position means that annual operating have been financed through borrowing. Being in an accumulated deficit position means that an entity will require future revenues to finance its historic operations. It's important to assess the strength or weaknesses of the financial position presented, as well as how the position is trending over time. So for us, for the town in 2021, the town had an unrestricted deficit of $6.4 million and a restricted surplus of $10.9 million. This means that the net reserves of the town were $4.5 million approximately. By 2024, the situation had improved significantly. Unrestricted is now in a surplus position of $2.6 million, and the restricted surplus increased to $16.7 million. So overall, that's a $14.7 million improvement in your surplus deficit over that period of time. So that concludes my presentation. Again, I felt it was beneficial. Well, it's informative, and it shows us where we were and where we are. And yeah, I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Whoops, I managed to press a different button and make that noise. Okay, okay, so if someone was to try and explain this, we're in a better financial position, much better than we were 3 years ago. And I heard you say something about more efficient accounting kind of practices. You want to kind of just tell me the top 5 at the beginning, please.
Sure. As I say, it's a combination of things. So whether you say more efficient or just following the rules more strictly, perhaps, that's one element of it. I know CAO Miller and our team in administration has been really focused at you know, it's tough to say like cut the fat, eliminate waste, things like that, but. We really have been trying to just make things more efficient without reducing service. That's really what it boils down to. And then there's also an element of prioritizing what we're doing. You know, we did have some turnover within the leadership team of administration here. And during that period of time, you know, that can create, you know, a period where the new person needs to figure out, is it a good use of spend? So that's an element of this.
So fresh eyes. kind of
Yeah,
thing.
fresh eyes and saying, you know, is the way that we did it in the past the best way to continue to do it? So it's as I say, it's really a combination of things. Our portion of Peace Regional Waste has also improved the position as well. And just, you know, choices by council to not continue to use debt financing as a way to pay for our capital. So again, is that sustainable in the long term? It depends on the choices of this and future councils. But I can say in my review of, you know, other municipalities in the region, things like that, it's not usual for municipalities to be in a net debt position because you're effectively saddling your future taxpayers, your future ratepayers with that liability. So I consider this a very positive change over this period of time.
Councillor Shannon, thank you.
You've done a really good job, Sam. I have one question just on a term. It was on one of the first pages and it was trade and other receivables. I've never heard that term, trade and other receivables. What would the trade portion refer to?
So trade and other is just kind of I guess a grouping of your if you have different agreements and things like that in place, balances that can be owed to you. So yeah, like our taxes and grants in place of receivables, that line item is basically everything municipal taxes related, and that is a number that's net of your allowance for doubtful accounts, and then trade and other is all other receivables, basically. So we could, as an example, that number would pick up if we had a grant where we have completed the work, so we're eligible to recognize the revenue for it, but we haven't submitted our reporting. So we haven't gotten that money back, right? Because in some instances, you might have a capital grant where you get the money up front. Some of our provincial and federal funding is like that, where we just get an allotment every year, whether we've earned it or not, we get it. Other grants, we get the money on the back end. So we do the work and you know, a large chunk of that in 2024, that trade and other receivables is related to, I believe, a small community fund, which was work that we've already earned and recognized the revenue, but we just haven't received those funds yet. Thank you.
Any other questions of Mr. Buckford on this item? Well, good news, and so general public thinks we have lots of money now, and therefore we able to do anything and everything general public wants. Maybe not.
I wouldn't characterize it that way. I'd say our position's improved.
Yeah.
It's still not, I wouldn't consider this a strong
Yeah.
statement of financial position, but it's improving. It's moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
And it's moved, you know, pretty rapidly over that period.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you and your staff for getting us to this position. Okay, but you're gonna stay there now, and you're gonna tell us about a request for finance, a customer service representative.
Your worship.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, thank you, your worship. I put a motion on the floor that council accept the 3-year financial performance, 2021 to 2024 briefing note for information.
Thank you. I was so excited about the news that I forgot.
There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Okay, any questions on Mr. Ford's motion? All those in favor? Great, thank you. Now, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the next item is in relation to our customer service representative position. So as per the organizational staffing policy, P8070A, administration is requesting the reclassification of a casual 0.8 full-time equivalent or FTE customer service representative position to a full-time permanent customer service position under the Corporate Services Department. A bit of background on this. So in March of 2022, a consultant, WMC, completed an organization and compensation review for the town of Peace River, resulting in several organization recommendations. Specific to the Corporate Services Department, recommendations included the addition of an IT specialist. So this was achieved through the use of a managed service provider to supplement the existing system specialist position. The other item was an additional HR specialist. So at the time the report was completed, the HR coordinator reported directly to the CAO. In late 2022, the HR coordinator was promoted to HR manager. The payroll and taxation clerk, which was formerly under finance department, was reassigned to report to the HR manager. Other non-payroll related duties previously assigned to the payroll and taxation clerk were reassigned within the finance department. And the health and safety coordinator position was realigned by moving it from reporting to the fire chief to reporting to the HR manager. So effectively within organizationally, we moved a person from finance to report to the HR manager and check the box of now we've got someone to support the HR manager, because that function over time, the responsibilities and duties associated with that have just grown. So by moving one position from finance to HR, this did create a bit of a gap in coverage within the finance department. While fully rolling out the changes until impacts could be evaluated and the need for resources was confirmed, the gap has been filled using a casual employee. Under the current structure, this casual position works 0.8 FTE with approximately 1,560 hours per year. As such, those hours are included within the annual operating budget, and this request only includes an increase of 390 hours and an adjustment in the form of additional benefits that full-time position would require. There are several issues which arise without an established customer service representative. So lower quality of customer service, longer wait times, lower productivity on all the other finance staff. So if our taxation clerk or utilities clerk are constantly having to cover that front desk, it diminishes their ability to complete their roles. It also makes it more challenging with scheduling the breaks and leave and things like that. These issues will be exacerbated during the upcoming challenges facing the organization, including change of buildings and a required enterprise resource planning system conversion, which is basically due to a discontinuation of our current software provider. So by 2029, we'll no longer be able, our current software will no longer be supported. So we need to make a change between now and then to a new ERP. By promoting these CSR to a full-time permanent role, this will allow the finance manager an opportunity to complete the department's internal realignment of responsibility. So it's hard right now with our current structure. Our taxation clerk still has customer, like the CSR element as part of her job description, because we didn't have permanent role to move it to. So by being able to do that, we'll be able to complete the realignment of duties within that department. Additionally, the increased hours from 0.8 FTE to 1 will enable the allocation of 0.2 FTE to so 390 hours of front counter reception, which is currently being covered by others within the finance team, towards support for protective services, including fire, to ensure invoicing completeness, validity, accuracy, as well as reconciliation and collection of fines fees for services and response. So, under our current structure right now, my EA is providing support to the fire departments and to bylaw. So we'll be able to shift a lot of the responsibility relating to collection of those receivables, especially as Director Kress and his team kind of ramp up the action. There's going to be more and more demands requiring support there. So this is a little bit of a bridge gap in terms of we'll be able to support that within the finance department until such time that if council determines that Director Kress needs an EA dedicated to his department, we'll transition that. So in accordance with the organization staffing policy, an organizational needs assessment was completed to support the creation of the new permanent CSI role within finance. So there's basically six questions. So the first is, where does the role fall within the organization hierarchy? So in this case, it falls the finance manager, the finance department, located within the town hall structure within corporate services overall. How are the services and functions currently being met? So the position is currently providing most functions within the hours scheduled for the casual employee. The hours are existing and being allocated as required. 3, what is the service gap or functional redundancy the change will address? So there is no service gap, rather a need to provide a permanent position to an employee that is working regular schedule. So again, we have one person that's currently working that 0.8. And it's been a prolonged period of time that's been the case. So to be fair to that individual and also to the organization to reestablish that position as a full-time role. That's why we're suggesting this. B, due to need, the position and individual have been consistently scheduled, and as I said, moving from 0.8 to an FTE will enable that additional time for supporting protective services they're billing. 4, how will service functions be reallocated and impacts on their operational units? So the creation of a permanent position addresses staff retention, and the additional 0.2 FTE will assist the taxation clerk, who is currently, as I said, the portion of her job is currently still assigned to that function. It also takes some of the burden off the utility clerk and the accounting clerk, who provide redundant coverage of the front whenever there's a vacancy there. Budgetary impact, as I mentioned, the creation of a new permanent FTE, it's adding 0.2 to that position, and it's overall about $15,000 impact when you include those additional hours and benefits for that position. And item 6, benefits. So this addresses an individual that is employed as casual that's been working a regular schedule for over 1.5 years, which is not the standard for casual positions. Therefore, creating a permanent position is the responsible action to address this discrepancy. And B, it mitigates the risk of lost revenue due to missed invoices for effective service response. So the options before council this evening, option 1 is council approve a change to the town's organizational structure by converting a casual CSR position to a full-time equivalent permanent customer service representative position under the corporate services division. The advantages to this is it addresses the need to adjust the discrepancies that were outlined within the needs analysis. It assists in employee retention and increased revenue by mitigating the risk of missed invoices if capacity. There's no disadvantages to this. The financial implication is an increase in approximately $15,000 per year for the addition of a small number of hours benefits. Option 2 would be for council to decline to create a new permanent FTE. There's no advantages to this. The disadvantages are reduced employee attraction and retention capabilities. The position would continue to exist as a casual full-time equivalent, which again is basically fulfilling full-time responsibilities without the access to full-time benefits. And there's a potential for missed revenue due to capacity issues. The financial implications is just the cost of turnover. If it's not a permanent role, in general, it's harder to attract and retain quality individuals in that role. The recommendation from administration is that council approve the creation of one full-time permanent CSR position in the corporate services departments. Thank you. I'll take any questions.
Councilors? Councilor Ford?
So this only increases by 0.2.
So currently, we budgeted for 0.8 as casual. We're going to be eliminating that and doing one FTE as a full-time permanent. That's effectively the change. The finance department is effectively down half an FTE from the change that we made, moving one person from finance over to HR. But we just never recreated that position. It was something that, again, there was significant consideration given to this, and it's a pretty vital role for the organization as the face of the town. When you come through those doors, they're generally the first person you're going to be greeting. They serve the whole of this building in terms of when we have guests. They're often the person that will, guide them to wherever they're going. They're the voice that's on the phone when you call in, that type of thing. So it's, again, we feel it's a pretty strong case for making that a permanent role.
Thank you. Any other questions? So essentially, the 15,000 might be made up in, the revenue aspect of, being able to look for that, I guess.
I don't know, I can't say with certainty, but I do suspect that would be the case, and I also think that, the lost value of that role being filled is pretty significant in terms of the overall efficiency of the department. I know we've been focused on, and as council's seen, the quality of financial statements has improved, the number of unadjusted errors has dropped, those types of things. That is all the product of that machine functioning well. And, I've got every confidence in our finance manager that empowering her with more resources, she'll be able to get more out of that department and be able to continue the good work that she's been doing down.
Good. The other question is Councilor Scammon.
I think the most significant thing you said though is this individual has been, or this position has been being filled in essentially a full-time capacity. And I don't know if you call it cheating the system by having them remain casual, and I'm not saying we're acting unethically, but I think to recognize that this is something that's important, it's vital. They've been filling this capacity, they're doing full-time work and commitment. I think it's appropriate to make that position one that gets all the benefits of the commitment that it is required of it by the organization to work. So getting the benefits and all that stuff that goes along with that level.
Yeah, absolutely. In this case, there's always that kind of pay equity consideration. But this also aligns with the organizational goals as well. So I think it achieves both outcomes.
Thank you. Any further questions? Someone want to move us along with motion? Any sort of Councilor Carr?
I'd like to move the council approve a change to the town's organizational structure by converting a casual customer service representative position to an FTE permanent customer service representative position under the corporate services department.
Thank you. Are there any further questions, clarification on the motion? Okay, everybody is clear on the reading of the motion? Okay, all those in favor? It is carried. Thank you, Mr. Mumford. And now Mr. Mumford is going to tell us about the collection of tax arrears at manufactured home parks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this is a bit of a, continuation on some of the discussion we've had previously. So we're requesting council's direction on the preferred option for collection of property taxes at manufactured home parks. So a bit of background, administration has historically encountered challenges in the collection of property tax from residents in manufactured home parks. This difficulty arises because manufactured homes are more akin to vehicles than traditional houses, and as such are not titled or registered with Alberta Land Titles Office. So meaning typical tax arrear recovery methods can't be utilized normally if the property someone doesn't pay their taxes, town has the ability to form a tax auction to recover those arrears. It doesn't work that way for manufactured homes. So consequently, the town is currently owed $19,013.65 in manufactured home property tax arrears, with civil enforcement being the only available method of collection. Taxation of manufactured homes consumes a disproportionate amount of the tax clerk's time, particularly when considered relative to the total taxation roll. So, again, our net municipal taxation is over $12 million. The 19,000 that we're owed, it's not a significant amount of it, but it does consume a significant amount of time because it's so challenging to pursue those funds from those individuals. Administration has prepared 3 alternatives for council's consideration to address these challenges. So option 1 would be for council to direct administration to draft an assessment of designated manufactured homes in a manufactured home community bylaw for consideration. So this proposed bylaw would assign responsibility for the payment of property taxes to private owners of manufactured home parks. Park owners would then recover these costs from the residents through rent adjustments or other methods that they would determine. The MGA allows for this, and the relevant text is found in section 3041J2 and 331(1). So the advantages of this is it improves the collectability of proposed tax receivables as manufactured home parks already collect rent, and they have the most current information on their residents. Quite often, by the time it gets to an arrears state, that trailer might have moved on. We don't always have the most current information on our end, so it makes collection a lot harder. It establishes a clear and concise process for tax collection from manufactured homes, and a draft bylaw is already prepared and ready for consideration if council wishes to consider it. Disadvantages is it shifts the responsibility for tax collection to a private manufactured home park operator, which increases their workload a bit. The financial implications is it improves the collectability of tax receivables. It reduces the disproportionate amount of administrative time that's spent on collecting those arrears from mobile homes. Option 2 is for council to direct administration to draft a mandatory monthly tax payment plan for manufactured home owners bylaw for consideration. So what this option would do is the town would choose to adopt a bylaw requiring all manufactured home owners to participate in a monthly property tax payment plan. Under this system, manufactured homeowners would be required to enroll in the town's monthly tax payment program, with your annual property taxes divided into 12 installments automatically withdrawn from their bank account throughout the tax year. So the advantages to this are it improves the collectability of taxes receivable, and it gives us up-to-date owner information that will be immediately given to the town. Some of the disadvantages. So it's a high reliance on the manufactured home park owners to provide accurate homeowner information. So we're still dependent on them to provide us with that information accurately. It creates a greater administrative burden for the tax clerk to implement and manage all these payment plans, as it requires additional resources to track and to enforce participation. The potential for non-compliance or missed payments despite the plan still exists. Manufactured homeowners would require a valid bank account, and there's time needed to draft the bylaw and get it. Financial implications, so payments, returns, non-sufficient funds will incur fees, which residents would be required to pay. Unpaid property tax payments will become arrears as of January 1 the following year and will need to be collected through civil enforcement. So option 2 doesn't resolve the issue relating to civil enforcement. It could still come to that if the owner of the manufactured home doesn't pay their taxes. It just makes it, for some taxpayers, when they're on the payment plan, it makes it a little bit easier. You know, if your tax bill is $500 a year, paying $42 a month is a little more palatable for them than having to save up and pay that on one shot. Option 3 would be effectively status quo. So direct administration just to basically continue to do what we're doing. So the town would continue the process for collecting from manufactured homes. There's no advantage to this. The disadvantage is high reliance on private manufactured home park owners to provide accurate information. It'll, continue to consume a lot of administration's time. It's also, it's a fairly, for those people that are in arrears, it's a fairly punitive experience for them to have to undergo civil enforcement, which we've talked about previously. So the recommendation is that council direct administration proceed with the approval of the assessment of designating manufactured homes and a manufactured home community bylaw. This is something that was brought before council previously, at the time it was defeated, but we still feel as administration that it's the best option of what's available. But we're certainly willing to proceed with whatever direction council sees fit. Thank you all for any questions.
Questions, Councillor Shan?
So basically, doing it the way we're doing it now, you can, the chances of recovering that money are slim because you can't take the, you have to take payment either cash or you can seize items. Is that, so that makes it messy, correct? Or
Correct. So we would employ a third-party bailiff service to go in and seize property to collect both the amount owing and the cost of enforcement.
so basically, it's costing us money to collect the money. We're gonna be probably,
But we will incur the cost up front if they're successful in securing something of value, then we would recover that. But the amount of the cost of the enforcement would also be tacked onto their what they owe. So in a scenario where someone owes us $2,000 and it's gonna cost us $500 to send someone to enforce, they would need to collect $2,500 worth of goods. So if they're able to seize something like cash or gold or something like that, where it's very liquid and convertible, but like, again, my concern with this is if more often than not, it's gonna be something like electronics, vehicles, things where the replacement cost could significantly exceed what the value that they'll be able to get or the value that'll be assigned to it is. So that's why I say it can be really hard on those individuals that are undergoing that level of enforcement.
and I did read that more and more municipalities are going this way. I see that there's 3 more, I think 2 weeks ago, I read somewhere that there's more going this route.
Again, it's a requirement of the MGA that we pursue, that we do everything within our power to collect amounts, and it's not fair on all of our other residents that pay their taxes if we don't go after individuals that have a liability and are paying it.
I mean, I meant, more municipalities are adopting a bylaw like you're talking about here, where the owner of the park collects it, not the actual municipality.
Certainly, yeah.
I know there was like
It's
3 last month.
it's becoming more and more common because of the method that municipalities have to pursue it's inefficient, and the for-profit owners of these manufactured homes, the landowner, they collect that month, they collect their rent every month, so they've got their finger on the pulse of what their tenants are up to. Whereas by the time that the town knows that they're not gonna pay, it's already a year and a half later, and they could have left town, the structure could have been destroyed. We don't know. So it's, again, municipalities are putting a bylaw like this in place because it best aligns the for-profit business that's generating money off those rents. They're the ones that they have that information. We, as a municipality, don't.
Any other questions? Councillor Carr, then Councillor Scallon.
Could we maybe look at a blended policy? Where we pass the bylaw that their tax need to be paid monthly, but that it's up to the trailer park owner to add that to their monthly rent, like rather than dumping these, cause I'm assuming with the first one, we're going to be dumping the outstanding ones onto the owner as well, like put a little bit of bite behind it with the town putting the bylaw in place rather than the trailer park owner.
So Counselor, I'll need to confirm with our tax clerk and look into whether or not in an instance where it's say it's August and we have a trailer that burns, whether or not the landowner would be responsible for that continuation of the rest of the years payable or not. I'll need to confirm that. I intuitively, I don't think that would be the case, that they would be responsible for that, because they would report to us of that change in circumstance. But again, you're gonna be dealing with kind of those fringe scenarios. So this is, again, the point of this is really to reduce some of the administrative burden on our end if we're going after these relatively small dollar amounts. It's tough to do because you know, within our manufactured home communities, there are lots of individuals that do pay on time. So it's not, you know, this isn't in any way a judgment against them or anything like that. It's just the enforcement mechanism that we have is inefficient.
My only concern is dumping tax collection onto somebody that doesn't do tax collection, to be honest. I understand it's cumbersome to the town and everything, but that is something we do. It isn't something they do. So I'm wondering if we could work together and make it a bylaw, but allow them to essentially collect it based on our bylaw.
So option one effectively achieves that. Is your concern just around whether or not that they would be liable in the event that, in the event of non-collection?
No. Yeah, my concern is what is outstanding. Like the town dumping that onto a for-profit trailer or mobile park owner. Are they going to be liable, or will we be starting with a clean slate with a new bylaw saying that you have to pay monthly with 90 days notice, because that's what they'll need to increase their rent, and you know, that sort of thing, to work together with them.
So having not gone through this myself, I don't have a clear answer, but I suspect that with any arrears that are owing to the town, that burden wouldn't have shifted. So anything that's owing as of time that the bylaws implemented, we wouldn't be expecting the trailer park operators to be trying to collect on those balances. It would be something that, and again, this is because other municipalities have already brought this in place. If we get to that point that this bylaw was to pass, we would, you know, work with the trailer park or the manufactured home park owners to make this process as easy for them as well. This isn't intended to make a bunch of extra work for them. I'm envisioning that we do our calculation based on the assessed values. We say to them, here's the amount that you need to collect per month from each of these properties. It's a spreadsheet, and they just add it to the bill. And whether or not they choose to add on an administrative fee for that service or not is up to them. But the plan would be to make this as easy as possible on them. It's not about, you know, making additional work for those operators.
Councillor or CAO Miller, then Councillor Scamhorn, Councillor Good, Councillor Shan.
Thank you, Worship. I was just gonna weigh in. I don't believe there would be any arrears, correct, in that statement moving forward. I haven't checked the MGA lately. I'm not even sure if it would be, if it was passed, if it would be effective next tax year, or do we have to give one full year tax notification? Because there is a requirement to give the park owners ample notice. So are you aware of the date on that?
I believe you're correct in that there's a year of notice period, but again, that would be subject to condemnation.
Thank you.
I think it would be. Like a number of people have their taxes attached to their mortgages as well, so they have one fee and it takes care of all of that, and the bank kind of handles that for them or their mortgage lender. So I would see this is something very similar, and I think something that a lot of people might find more convenient instead of having to come down here and make separate arrangements for that to be done themselves. So yes, I understand there would be an initial upfront burden on the trailer or the manufactured park owner and the town to, you know, liaise and get the system rolling, but I can see that once it's rolling, it would seem like everybody involved is just gonna have a much easier time. It's much more automatic. If I'm a resident in there, then I'm just paying once into one place. I'm dealing with multiple things, potentially, you know, land rent, water, and taxes just on one bill. That I'm gonna find that much more convenient, probably easier to deal.
Okay, Councilor Good.
Yeah, there's always a reticence to pass the work on to somebody else, but I mean, the federal government has done it at GST where they pass the collection of taxation onto the business owner. The province has done it in terms of recycling fees on electronics and that where they pass it on to the retailer to collect those fees, et cetera. So it's because when you're dealing with a smaller amount, the logistics for them to do it is incredibly expensive. They'd have to hire staff to go around everywhere. The logistics on the actual business owner, well, not non-existent or even in some cases insignificant. It's a lot easier for the government to have one place to go to collect. So it's not a fairly consistent philosophy in a way of trying to achieve efficiencies in the generation of the collection of the tax revenue. So I don't see any real reason not to, especially given the notice periods that would be necessary, especially given the, you know, here's how you're gonna have to do it, or you have a choice of how you do it to a degree in terms of the property owner. So I'm not sure it's all that onerous. I mean, obviously, nobody likes it when they have to do it. I didn't like the GST. Once you got used to it, it's just a line item. So.
Thank you, Councilor Shannon.
In your opinion, would it be worth it to try the town charging the monthly fee? And trying that before you go to the full on bylaw, or would you suggest going straight to the bylaw and just doing it?
Well, they both be bylaws, but my concern with option two is we still ultimately end up in the same place. If we're not getting timely reporting from the manufactured, the manufactured home owners, or sorry, the park owners, if we're not getting, and again, it's, you know, I've heard mixed experiences in terms of how timely and how accurate that information has been. I think that option two, we ultimately will end up in the same place, just less so, because I think that for, you know, a lot of people, like I'm on the monthly payment plan because I just think it's easier to have, you know, 1/12 of the bill come out every month. So, you know, I think that for lots of people, it makes the actual paying easier, and so you're less likely to have that, you know, that moment where you're not prepared to pay that big balance.
But in that one, are you talking of the town collecting that or the owner of the park collecting that? The monthly, are we talking about two different things here?
So no, like for option one, it would be on the park owner as to how they want to spread that out, but I would anticipate that they would put it on their monthly lot rent. Okay. And again, we would support them with, here's the assessments, here's how much you need to collect, here's 1/12 of it. And, you know, make it as easy on those park owners as possible. But for option two, again, it's an improvement on what we had, but it still doesn't resolve the underlying issue. We're still gonna end up in a place where there's going to be errors and we're going to have to use civil enforcement, which walking through that process, it takes a lot of administration's time because it has to be done properly. And it can lead to some really unfortunate situations too. Like, again, it's not something that I've ever experienced or something that we've done here recently, but it's, and then imagine it would be a very unpleasant thing to have to undergo.
Okay. CAO Miller.
I just further to the comment, Councillor Shannon. I would be concerned, the cost of NSF payments. So if someone had a $20 a month tax payment, and they need to come out of the bank, there is possibility if you are struggling where that $20 was all part of your rent payment. I hate to see NSF charges being incurred unnecessarily. I think that would avoid that by the tax or the property park owner collecting.
Okay, Councillor Ford, any comments on this one? Anybody with new comments, any questions?
I just want to clarify something. I would like to see, no matter who ends up collecting it at the end of the day, that we have a bylaw saying that in Peace River, if you have a mobile home, you have to pay it monthly. Can we do that? Whether it be paid, whether we decide to have the town collect it or whether we decide to have the mobile home park collect it, could we make a bylaw that states it has tax on mobile homes because they are mobile, needs to be paid monthly?
I feel like once we pass it on to the. I feel like once we pass it on to the operator of the trailer for the manufactured home park. We sort of run out of authority to dictate how they do that. The most logical way is to do it by the month, but.
Okay, CAO Miller and then Councillor Good.
I was gonna say, I have to weigh in and get a legal opinion on that. Because technically taxes are due on the due date. And you're privileged to do it monthly if you sign up for a monthly payment plan. But the law says, as far as I understand, we impose taxes on a certain date it's due. And how I believe if the park gets assessed, they get one tax bill and I believe then it's listed by individual improvements. So we'll have what I anticipate it being is they'll have their land bill and then it would be improvements lot 1 and this is the bill, improvements lot 2 and that's the amount and it'd go by lot. So they would know exactly the tax amount for each improvement or each lot. And then it would be between the lot owner, the park owner and the lot renter to decide if the park wants to take it annually or monthly as part of their lot rental, I would believe. Otherwise, I think we would have to get legal opinion to say you must pay monthly if you're in a mobile park.
Oh, okay.
So you're saying they would get their tax assessment with the breakdown on that, so they would have to pay that by the end of June, and then they would have to accept the credit or extend credit to their renters to pay it monthly on what was paid on that.
I believe so, or they could sign up for the monthly payment plan at no cost, right? And pay on a monthly basis as well. So they would be able to collect monthly and pay monthly, or they could just pay it all at once. That would be entirely up to their,
I like the idea. I just would like to see some kind of support from the town, if possible, where we could pass a bylaw before we pass it off to the mobile home park owners, where mobile home taxes need to be paid monthly. It would make it a lot easier for them to do that, and it would protect us and the park owners if we had a bylaw in place saying that mobile homes, and I don't know if we can, this is
Yeah,
not,
yeah.
I'm just saying that would make it easier and it would protect everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Good.
Well, where I see some difficulty with that is if a person had a mortgage on their mobile home. And their taxes are being collected by the mortgage company. And you're saying they have to pay it monthly, the mortgage company's gonna do it to the mortgage company, but they're not gonna send us the money monthly. They send us up on the due date. So, I don't know that it would work logistically to do that because you have to figure out what financial arrangements each owner has on each house. My feeling is that we pass I'd be prepared to make a motion to provide second reading of the bylaw make sure we have that notice you're talking about, Barb, making sure there's the proper amount of notice to the park to say this is how it's going to work. And give them time to do the calculations and see how it's gonna work out. If they come back with something that shows that it's impossible to do or extremely onerous, then they can make that case. But I don't think there's any problem with going through and with that bylaw, so I'm prepared to make the motion, so. Sorry?
Counselor Carr?
I think the last time we went through this, the trailer park owners did show up here and express that it would be a problem.
Well,
They didn't come here.
I don't think,
no,
yes,
they never
they
came
did.
here.
Yes,
No,
they did.
Not-
Yes,
they
they did.
didn't
The
come
operators did. Yes, they did.
Sorry,
over.
Mr. Mugford?
So I can clarify that, like, administration met with the representatives for the owners of the manufacturing parks. And they did express their concerns with us. But again, that's, you know, their position, I can summarize, was they don't want it because it's extra work for them. But again, I would argue that it's proportionally a lot more work for the town to collect those arrears than it is for the for-profit manufactured home owners to collect. Because they, as I say, they've got their finger on the pulse, they know the comings and goings of their tenants. And I expect that they would not wait a year and a half to collect back rent from their tenants. And so by putting in a bylaw like option one, it puts that liability on the trailer park owner, the manufactured home owner, manufactured park owner to collect those balances. Which, yeah, I feel like it aligns with their interests, right? Like they're in the business of collecting.
Thank you. Ms. Parsons, did you have a point at some point? No, you're good? Okay, Counselor Ford?
Maybe it would help, Counselor Carr's concerns that this is just second reading. So it
So,
well,
Councillor Ford,
provides second reading as a recommended motion.
so just to clarify, we included a copy of bylaw 2146, which is what was brought before council previously. And it was defeated on second motion, so this was in February of 2024. So again, it was brought back because we, subsequent to that, had further discussion regarding civil enforcement that we're going to be undertaking this summer. And it was one of the alternatives for council to consider if we want to avoid those types of enforcements in the future.
Okay, so how would you expect the motion to be? If it's not in the note? It's the motion you want in the notes, where is it? Sorry?
There's three options suggested. Oh, Ms. Parsons now?
There are two reports attached to that. The one that's dated for today's meeting has the three separate recommendations. The other report is the previous report that just had a little bit more information about the bylaw that when it had come.
Okay, I see. Yeah.
That's why it's attached, but there is motions on there
Okay, I
about
refreshed
drafting.
it, I knew it came up. Okay,
Perfect.
thank you. Well, I'm prepared to make that motion, see what happens, see where it happens.
Okay, Mr. Good.
Okay, I'll move the council direct administration to draft an assessment of designated manufactured homes and a manufactured home community bylaw for consideration.
Thank you. Any further discussion, clarification?
Just for consideration then.
Yeah, and then it would come to first reading.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Okay, everybody's clear on the motion and its meaning? Even, all those in favor of the motion? Opposed? It is carried. Thank you, Mr. Mugford. Okay, I think everyone needs to stand up here for 5 minutes. That would keep us clear-headed and we can work our way through.
Okay,
7:38.
Me too.
I have my break.
back in order here. And Mr. Munford is now going to talk to us about tangible capital asset management. Sounds exciting.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Apologies, just a minute. So. This again was brought to council on May 5th at the GMP meeting. Administration's prepared some revisions to TCA policies. The previous one was P1281A, which was approved on October 30th, 2020. Summarize the changes. We're looking at increasing the threshold for capitalization of certain asset classes. Removing reference to assets that are no longer within the town's purview, and some modification of the length of time for which assets are being amortized, and a bit of clarification around the disposal process, so the determination and method of disposal of tangible capital assets. So when we brought this to the GMP, there wasn't a huge amount of discussion around it, but the options for council this evening are to either approve the proposed changes as presented. The advantages of this are will reduce administrative burden. It eliminates reference to capital asset types no longer applicable to the town, and clarifies the roles and responsibilities regarding disposal. There's no disadvantage. The financial implications are by increasing the threshold for capitalization. It will very modestly increase the time frame in which capital expenditures are recognized on the income statement. So they'll be recognizing those expenses a little bit sooner on the income statement. Again, example of this is under the current policy. If I buy a $1,500 laptop, I'm supposed to amortize that over a 5-year period. Under the proposed policy, anything up to $5,000 within that class would be expensed. We're going to buy the computer right away. It's just a matter of how we record the expense. Option 2, council could decline to approve the proposed changes. There's no advantages to that. The disadvantages are it maintains the status quo, which maintains the current level of administrative burden, does not eliminate the references to the old asset types we no longer have, and it leaves the roles and responsibilities regarding asset disposal vague. And option 3 would be for council to approve a proposed change to the TCA management policy as amended. So if you have any amendments, option 3. The request is that council approve proposed changes to the tangible capital asset TCA management policy as presented. Thank you. I'll take any questions.
Councillor Carr?
Now, by writing it off, rather than amortizing over a period of time, I understand that from a private business standpoint, because you want to lower your taxable income. The reason we're doing this is just because of administrative costs with the amortization. Is that correct?
Yeah, generally it takes time to create an asset in our fixed asset subledger and then record the amortization expense. And then when we ultimately dispose of that asset, that's another accounting entry, right? Because you have to remove the asset and the associated cumulative amortization from that subledger. So, you know, it's not onerous if it's like $1 million piece of equipment. But when you're talking about individual laptops, yeah, you know, like this year, we're probably going to be buying 50 computers because we haven't done much evergreening over the past few years. And that's with Windows 10 no longer being supported, we need to do a bunch. That's why we put $70,000 in the budget to do a lot of computer replacements this year. Under our current policy, those each need to be an asset.
So that would be wise because it'll save us a lot of money on administrative time and so on, just tracking it and dropping the value over time.
I can't quantify how much time it'll save.
Yeah, I don't even know.
A lot of the proposed changes that we bring forth to you are just to make our operations more efficient.
Yeah, and one more quick follow-up question to that is with Duncan at all beginning, is it going to have any kind of a tax implication down the road where you're gonna need money to make up for what was written on, or does that just work itself?
So just on, it'll front load your tax burden a little bit. Because as an example, the $70,000 that I put, that we put in our capital budget this year. Under the current policy, that would be spent and the expense would be recorded over 5 years. Under the proposed policy, it would be in your operating budget, so you'd have to collect tax for it this year rather than over the next 5 years. So you're just front loading it a little bit more. You're ultimately gonna see slightly higher equipment, software, those types of expenses, and slightly lower amortization expense. But in the long run, there's no difference in terms of the total cost.
Okay, great.
Any other questions, CAO Miller?
I just want to add another comment that removing, capitalizing the smaller pieces of equipment will help to maintain the integrity of our asset subledger. Because it's hard to remember, oh shoot, that $2,000 piece of whatever has to be disposed. And then remember to send that to accounting to get them to do all those entries, so. Yeah, it keeps our asset ledger clean as well.
That makes sense.
Any other questions, counselors, clarifying? Okay, would someone like to put forth the motion on the matter?
Move the council approve the revised TCA management policy as presented.
Thank you. Any further clarification? Everybody's clear on the motion? Favor? It is carried. Thank you, Mr. Rutherford.
Thank you.
Okay, and next up, we have, Mrs. Miller, organizational structure, addition of a community peace officer position.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the request for decision before you is administration is seeking permanent addition of one community police officer to our organizational structure. So as council is aware that the out of the cold shelter has closed until late fall, safety concerns within the community are elevating, in particular downtown and in the parks and along the trails. These concerns within the community are valid, as we've seen last year over the summer. As the weather warms up, the level of social disorder and public nuisance increases downtown, and the level and number of encampment occurrences tend to rise. So we're not alone in trying to deal with these challenges that are brought on by mental health addictions, encampments, and the unhoused. And administration is working on a strategy that will utilize multiple tools to try and tackle this challenges that we're facing. So at the May GMP administration had presented a chart detailing the range of responsibilities and the level of authorities between the different fields of enforcement. So such as RCMP are responsible for the criminal activities on down to bylaw. And also in the chart that was provided, the information that was provided, it showed the enforcement that CPOs can enact and enforce, the different laws and regulations. And also when he was presenting, Director Kress had shown the number of files that the department thus far had done, had opened, the number of encampments, the number of tickets that have been issued, and provided a little bit of a snapshot of the weapons that have been confiscated so far. So under his direction, a lot of work in the last couple of months has happened, but there's much more work to be done. Recently hired Officer White, his official appointment came in last week to the town from the Solicitor General, and they're off actually to be picking up the second vehicle for their team. And so with that, we will now have 1.5 full-time dedicated CPO officers between him and Director Kress. We also have temporary bylaw services continuing, and he's working on managing the weed complaints, animal complaints. He's providing good support to development, eyes out and about, identifying things being built without permits. Unsightly properties, and we'll again be tackling the unlocked waste bins. So the CPO schedule, CPO officers typically work 4 10s, work 4 days on, 4 days off. Coverage will be in the afternoons, in the mornings, throughout the day. The shifts will be scheduled randomly so that people will not be aware of the schedule and necessarily be aware of when our CPOs are working. If we increase the department by 1 CPO, it would enable protective services to have at least 7-day-a-week coverage for 10 hours of the day. And that will ensure regular visibility and community connection. If approved, we will undertake aggressive search efforts immediately. And I'm anticipating that, given we have a well-experienced CPO as a director and now another experienced CPO on staff, and complemented by our temporary bylaw at the moment, I'm hoping then that the opportunity would seem desirable and our recruitment efforts will be much more successful now that we actually have a department happening. As mentioned earlier in a presentation, the town's organizational staffing policy requires that administration provides questions or responses to a number of questions in defense of the request. And so going through those questions, the CPO would fall under the Director of Protective Services. In addition to criminal code offenses, prior to hiring Director Kress, RCMP were responsible and relied upon for enforcement of provincial acts and municipal bylaws. The caseload and staffing shortages of the RCMP have minimized efforts towards basic enforcement, community engagement, and visibility. The CPO department is being reestablished after several years of being a defunct function. Doing so is going to re-elevate visibility, safety, and public confidence. Currently, the organizational structure allows for 1.5 FTEs, being 1 full-time CPO and the other half being provided by the director. As administration builds the CPO program, it's becoming increasingly clear that 1.5 positions are not meeting the needs of the community, given the level of social disorder that is being experienced. And adding an additional CPO position will allow administration to more effectively address community concerns and increase patrols. Specifically, the addition of 1 CPO will provide 7-day-a-week coverage and provide that comfort to business owners and residents that have concerns over public nuisance and social disorder. There is been no reallocation of work at this time, and there are no anticipated impacts to any other operational units. The CPOs will continue with the regular duties. However, adding another will increase the bench strength of the team. The estimated cost of adding this position for 2025 for salary, benefits, and outfitting is $60,000. Preliminary budget provision for 2026 would be estimated at $120,000. The partial restoration of the grants in lieu of taxes that the government of Alberta had announced this budget for 2025-2026 would cover the cost of the additional for 2025 and would also cover the full amount for next year's increase in budget cost as well. And further, if the government was to decide to reduce the grants and lieu of taxes again in the future, that we're kind of suggesting would fund this position now with a new development, $30 million proposed project that's underway, would absolutely cover this cost into the future. And again, the CPOs are able to recover revenue for us, so it wouldn't be the full 120, there would be an offset revenue generation for traffic control and whatnot as well. So expected benefits includes reduced social disorder, public nuisance downtown through Peace River, reduction of illegal weapons being carried within town, increased traffic safety through enforcement of speed limits, distracted driving, use of seatbelts, registration, insurance requirements, and unlicensed drivers, identification and removal of encampments, increased revenue, reduction in insurance and other costs to businesses resulting from damaged exteriors, increased ability for businesses to recruit for downtown locations, limiting likelihood of burnout of CPOs, and most importantly, restoring public confidence and the sense of safety and security, knowing there's one more CPO on the streets. So administration respectfully requests approval for addition of one CPO to the Town of Peace River's organizational chart and the addition of 60,000 to the 2025 budget to commence hiring immediately, or use of that additional 60,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, okay, Councillor Shannon, then Councillor Good.
I actually don't totally disagree with this. My problem is, I would rather see a temporary CPO until we get the policing study back that we're already behind on. I'd also like to see the plan that you have before we hire permanent. You said you were gonna have a kind of a plan together and the steps you're gonna take to improve things. I do have a question on the 10-hour shift, so there will be no night shift? What would be the latest in the evening they work?
I would have to speak to Officer Chris, but there will be no midnight to 8 AM shift, no.
Okay, yeah, I just worry that with the social disorder, we are kind of reactionary to it, and I would like to wait personally for the policing study hire. I would not be opposed to hiring one temporarily until the study came in, and you know, at that time, once you give us your vision of what kind of plans you have in place, I'd have no problem like reviewing that at the time, but I would like to see that position be temporary until the study and until you come and let us know what kind of a plan you have together, because you just said you have some other things there that you want to put into play. And then another thing is that maybe we can look at, so there's other things we can look at too in the meantime, like, you know, the light cameras, and there's gonna be, you know, citizens on patrol and things like that. I would just like to pause before we jump right into a permanent position and get the policing study, which he, you know, when the minister came, he did advise against the CPO going totally in that direction. So I would like to wait and see what comes back from that before we went totally permanent, and see what kind of plan you have before we went permanent. But I would have no opposition whatsoever to going temporary.
Councillor Good.
I'll be honest, I don't wanna wait. And to a degree, it's as simple as that. I mean, I went through the report that you had written there, and it talked about that we're not alone in trying to address the social disorders, et cetera. And you're quite correct. But we are also unique in having to manage the release of individuals, our community, from a prison, which other municipalities don't have happening. I don't know how long it's gonna take for that police report to get done. Between now and the fall, which you're looking at 3 months really, and the start of the cool weather, I don't see the time to wait for that report. As far as hiring a person permanently, it's like any other job within our organization. It's permanent until you don't need them again, at which point you revisit your allocation of resources. But you know, the other point you put in the letter was that it's going to help restore the feeling of security that residents, business owners, and visitors once enjoyed. And on top of that, I think they deserve it. And we're limited in the things that we can do rapidly. We're limited in the things that we can do effectively, just by legislation, by everything else. This is one of those things that we can do. And I don't want to see putting a cap on the result of what we're going to do based on something that may or may not happen in some sort of period of time. So my personal feeling is you don't wait, you hire the position, you get rid of it, you do whatever you need to do with the decision later once it's not needed. You know, that's just my feeling. I don't think it's something that the public wants us to wait at all. When they're talking to me, they want something done now. And if we don't do something now, we say, well, we're gonna kind of wait before we do anything, we'll wait till this report gets in. We're gonna be finished this summer, all of the negative stuff's gonna occur over the summer, and we're not gonna have it done. And if you're trying to hire somebody, you say, well, I'm gonna hire you, but I'm gonna hire it for a 3-month period. Your ability to hire is minimized drastically. Just by putting that artificial limit on it, by saying it's temporary. The same as trying to hire casual people is not as easy as hiring full-time people. So those are my arguments, those are my feelings.
Counselor Shannon, Counselor Scammore, and Counselor Ford.
Just on that policing study, let's be clear that we had 3 years to do that. We're the ones behind on that, nobody else. So just to be clear on that, but I have no problem with, I mean, we have a temporary bylaw. Is it gonna be that difficult just to have something temporary and we can keep it on for a length of time, like going into the winter? I just don't wanna be reactionary and like we have been and start hiring and adding to our organizational chart until we actually have a plan, or I'd like to see the CIO Miller's plan. That's all I'm saying. I know we have to do something quick. We should have done that a long time ago, personally, my feelings, but I mean, being reactionary isn't right either. So I don't know, can't we meet in the middle here somewhere?
Okay, CAO Miller, did you want to respond? And then Counselor Scammore and
Yeah,
Counselor.
thank you, your worship. A couple things. I know that it's been mentioned that the policing study, we had 3 years, but that study wasn't even available. It was only available for the last 2, and it was only a period and it's closed now. So please, it hasn't been 3 years. Secondly, you're absolutely correct. It would be extremely difficult to hire or try to hire. We can try to hire somebody temporary, but it's really hard to get anybody to come here to the north to work temporarily. Like we have opportunity on a potentially to engage some casuals, which means they would come for a weekend, they work somewhere else and maybe on their 4 days off, like when we have the jet boat event or when we have the amusement park here. We'll put out feelers for a casual employee to come because it's their day off and they come work for the day. But it will be extremely difficult to engage with temporary employee. So you're aware.
Counselors, okay,
Parsons said, I'll see.
Ms. Parsons then?
I just wanted to add to Barb's comments, for the reason for casual versus temporary and why bylaw would be a little bit easier to hire than a CPO. And bylaw, we internally authorize their ability to do our bylaws, enforce our bylaws, excuse me. But with CPOs, that's all done through the province. So they have to get appointed through the province and that takes time. They have to pass their peer test. We have to submit, I don't know the whole process, but we have to submit for authorization to get them appointed to the town, etc. So when we're engaging the casuals, it's actually a partnership between municipalities because that municipality is allowing us to use their appointed CPOs to administer in our town. We couldn't just hire a casual CPO randomly and say, you can now enforce our bylaws because they're not appointed by the province to do so, or enforce the provincial acts because they're not appointed. Those municipalities are lending us their casual CPOs, so that, or their CPOs for us to use casually. So that's another reason why it's a little bit more difficult and the nuances of bylaw versus CPO.
Thank you, very helpful. Counselor Scammore?
Yeah, Counselor Good kind of mentioned a bunch of things that I was going to mention. Number one, I think offering, and it's the same in any world, it's the same in the education world, it's the same everywhere else. If it says temporary, then you're going based on luck. If it says permanent, you're looking at somebody that is wanting to come to the community, they're gonna want to build the community, they're gonna have a sense of ownership in the community. So, and I think community peace officers, more than almost anything else, you want someone that's coming here that is dedicated, they have a sense of ownership and protectionism over the town, that they're really gonna pour their best into the town. We're giving them our best by offering it as a permanent position. And we would be able to attract the best and then expect the best out of them. in speaking with people that have been dealing with a lot of difficulties downtown, as well, this is something that they are greatly anticipating and really hoping that we do. I would like to see this actually as a recorded vote.
Thank you, Councillor Ford.
Yes, thank you. My first comment is, well, I agree with everybody's comments around the table so far. The stuff I learned when I was at the crime prevention conference just this past week was absolutely incredible. We talked a lot about this kind of stuff. My question would be, is what I would like to see is, again, I would like to see the plan too, is I've heard we're gonna hire 2 temporaries, then I see there was an announcement in the next 3 to 8 or 3 to 5 years, we're gonna hire 3 to 8 peace officers. That was announced at the RCMP meeting. Then we have this full-time equivalent in front of us today. But at the end of the day, what is administration's plan for the whole CPO program? Like, I'd like to see that plan. Number 2, we talked, not at the GMP meeting, but we did talk a little about the 2 temporary positions, because it was announced that the town or administration was gonna hire 2 temporary peace officer for CPO positions. So
Just to clear that,
with this
casual.
casual,
Casual is coming for a day. Or a shift.
can that be explained?
Your worship, if I may, a casual employment starts and ends on that shift. So there really is no employment relationship with a casual other than that particular shift.
Okay.
So to bring a casual employee in, which we talked about, we have mentioned, as I just said, would be like, for example, when the jet boat races are in, we either pay extra overtime fees to the RCMP at their rate, or we invite casual CPOs through our partnership municipalities to come and work a shift for us. So that's what a casual employee offers.
Oh, okay, cause I was under the impression that it was a temporary position, like our bylaw position, so that would almost be like 3 positions, like a full-time equivalent and for a full-time and 2 temporary.
No, and your
Okay.
worship, I know there was a conversation had by the director at a what's it? CAC committee meeting, but that was a vision of a new director of a department that he would like to see. And in the minutes, it actually says in the next 3 to 5 years. And he understands, we all understand that as the department evolves and develops, any permanent positions need to come forward for this conversation. That's very clear with administration.
No, I do understand that, and I'm looking at the numbers here, like that 120,000. Basically, that would be an average cost of a member per year for full-time employment under the CPO program. So at the end of the day, if administration's goal is to hire up to 8, how does that cost compare to a contract?
Okay, Councillor Good.
The concept, the discussion around hiring up to 5, 8, pick your number, I
Yeah.
don't care. We basically discussed the last meeting, saying any permanent full-time positions have to come back to the council for ratification. So the plans are irrelevant. The plans of hiring anything past this one are irrelevant except for a later discussion. They don't enter into it because they don't exist. They will exist when and if we agree to them. They won't exist until then. And I think that's an important consideration when we're going forward. Again, waiting for the plan. Oh, the other thing I want to talk about, and I sort of lost it, was this. I kind of agree with one thing that Councillor Ford said, which is that having a nighttime presence once in a while, or having some nighttime presence of midnight till such in the morning, I think is kind of non-negotiable to a degree. I think that has to be part of the employment. It doesn't have to be 5 days a week, but it has to be enough for the people out there to know that we're going to have people with capabilities out there sometime that they have to worry about. You want to create, what's the word, fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the mind of a person who's going to do something that they can't count. Like you said, you're not going to post the schedule of these people, and there's a good reason. You're not going to tell them when they're going to be out there at night, because you want them to be unsure. Right now, they're sure they can do what they want. How sure? They're hiring professionals to do it. We've heard about Councillor Ford was talking about the professionals that come up here and do the bad stuff. That's how sure they are they can get away with it. We want to make them worry about us. We want to make them worry about what we're doing. And my feeling is, I was totally in favor of spending $250,000 last year, basically to cover the same amount of time. I think we are going to get a higher level of service out of one CPO than we were able to get personally out of those people. We have other people on the streets, we have other organizations, we have the community watch, the crime watch going out there. We'll have other eyes on the ground. We want to be part of that solution. And I just don't see waiting as making us part of that solution. I think that we're just sitting there juggling balls around before we get something done.
Councillor Ford?
I totally agree. Having that visual presence 24/7 makes a difference. And there again, like I mentioned before, I've mentioned it a couple of times, I fully support the CPO program. I think where my misunderstanding was, and it was just explained to me, the difference between casual and a temporary. So if my understanding is we're wanting to hire an FTE plus 2 temporaries, which would be the same as a temporary bylaw, but now it's explained to me that it's not a temporary position, it's a casual position, so they'll come in and do a shift on their days off, like Sergeant, I can't remember his name, he did that for us like 4 years ago. He'd come in as a casual businessman. Yeah,
I don't remember his last name, so it's.
yeah,
Officer.
he's a sergeant, but his first, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, CEO Miller was in response to Mr. Ward.
Yes, Commission. I can't say never through the hours, but the concern at the moment is safety. And that means we would have a officer out alone through the hours of the night. It's easier to have somebody or a responder available. So when we get to the point where we have safety, or we can ensure that they can be out, there'll be some crossover perhaps that we would be able to do that, but it all has to be around officer safety.
Negotiate sometime with both.
If we know we have a dedicated RCMP that's there to respond or whatever, or we can partner with the bylaws, so there's 2 of them together, but right now. Those are our concerns, and it's a work in progress, right? We're evolving and developing and growing.
We did just have health and safety week last week. Councillor Shamp.
I just want to clarify what Ms. Parsons was saying about, there is no, it would be hard to get a temporary CPO is what you're saying, because we, is it impossible or hard? Like, explain that one to me, because I think I just misunderstood that.
Well, it'll be hard on 2 parts. So one being recruitment, it's always hard, especially coming north. It's not like we live beside Calgary and someone can take a temporary job and drive to us quite easily, right? Secondly, as Kayla mentioned, because the appointments come out of the Solicitor General, so for them to be, a person to be employed as a CPO for us, they have to go take a pair test. And they're only scheduled, so that's a fitness test. They're only scheduled every so often. And then once they pass that, we have to send that plus a health exam and a few other things to the Solicitor General. Then the Solicitor General evaluates all that and then makes their appointment and sends us a letter saying, yes, they have the authority to act as a CPO for you. And these are the acts that they have authority under. And so, a temporary employee, yeah. Is usually employed somewhere else, like,
They're not gonna do all that.
yeah,
No, I get to you now.
But getting an appointment to be a temporary,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
So
understand now.
I guess I'd like to say that, I remember the experience a few years ago trying to get and keep CPOs. So, what are my thoughts is if it's a permanent kind of contract, it's more attractive than a temporary type of contract. And therefore, the permanent, you might even be able to attract somebody with experience that's not starting at the training level that we had experience in the past, trained. Well, that means they were actually not on the job, they were being trained someplace. Then they kind of got on the job and they got a new one someplace else. That was the experience we had a few years ago. So that for that reason, I appreciate the thought of a permanent position. I appreciate the thought that we are going into this summer. We all hear constantly, we get pictures constantly of the disorder and the disheartening things that people are finding in their in our community actually right now. So I do think we need to move along and whether it's reactionary or proactive sort of thing, it's our community needs something. And the sooner the better on that aspect of my thoughts. So, Councilor Good?
Yeah, I'll make a motion if you wish.
Okay, you have motion and discuss motion. We need to.
I move the council approve the addition of one permanent full-time CPO to the Town of Peace River organizational chart and the addition of $60,000 to the 2025 operating budget to commence hiring immediately.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or discussions?
I'd like to make a comment.
Okay, Councilor Shannon, Ms. Parsons.
After hearing of the difference there between the casual, permanent and temporary, I would be more inclined to support this motion. And another reason I would is because there's an election upcoming, and if the new council decided for some reason there's only 4 months that we're talking here, so if the new council decided for some reason they wanted to back up on that, then they have the recourse, but this way we're covering the 4 months and they can go from there.
Thank you. Ms. Parsons?
Just adding to the motion and you're good with it, through increase, to be funded through increased 2025 grants in lieu of taxes revenue?
Absolutely.
And was that a formal request for the recorded vote?
Yes.
Thank you.
So perhaps you could read the entire motion then.
Move that council approve the addition of one permanent full-time CPO to the Town of Peace River organizational chart and the addition of $60,000 to the 2025 operating budget to be funded through increased 2025 grants in lieu of taxes revenue recently announced by GOA and to commence hiring immediately.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilor Carr?
First of all, I'm quite sure if memory serves me correctly, Director Kress was hired at a 70-30 position, not a 50-50 position.
You're
I'd
right.
like to get that checked possibly. In addition, the situations downtown have diminished drastically since the shelter closed. I don't know if they've just dispersed, but they are not having the problems downtown that they were having before. I don't know if a lot of those people went home. We have citizens on patrol that should be starting probably this weekend. I think there's something in front of administration right now regarding cameras, investigating cameras, that will help the RCMP as well as, these other organizations. I'm very reluctant to hire a new position, this quick without having explored a lot of other, opportunities or ideas or it's too quick with what has happened with the shelter closing, with citizens on patrol starting, like, we haven't even given these other ones an opportunity yet. And it is $120,000, which is 1% on the taxes. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments or clarification or motion? Does anybody want the motion read again?
Stop.
Want to read it? Could you please read it again, please?
Move that council approve the addition of one permanent full-time CPO to the Town of Peace River organizational chart and the addition of $60,000 to the 2025 operating budget to be funded through increased 2025 grants in lieu of taxes revenue recently announced by GOA and to commence hiring immediately.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, it's a recorded vote, so those in favor. Okay, I've got, I'll say councilor's last name, Shannon, Scammerhorn, Manzer, Ford, and Good. Opposed? Count the card. So it is carried. Thank you, Mrs. Miller, Councilor Ford.
Just so, it'll change the subject, but boilers too. I guess you might think.
Yeah.
Just wait till we sign that procedural guidance. It'll be a mystery for you for a long time.
You're forgiven.
5 minutes left in the first.
I do not know, better knock on wood because you probably.
Jinx, don't
Okay, number 8, we've got the Peace River Nuclear Project, the opportunity to provide feedback to IAC. Mrs. Miller.
Thank you, Worship. So as you mentioned, opportunity to provide feedback to IAC on the initial project description that was submitted by Energy Alberta, expires Wednesday, I believe it is, by 10 o'clock our time, I believe, Wednesday. So we would invite every member of the community to express and provide comment and express their concerns or in favor of online as part of the invitation to respond. But we have prepared a letter for the Town of Peace River's response to provide for council. The letter was attached for council's review and feedback on whether we've captured everything in your minds. I would like to say this is the first of many, many engagements, but this initial response that is provided will then form the summary of I'm drawing a blank. Summary of issues that will be gathered and put together and presented to Energy Alberta by IAC and Canadian Nuclear Safety on things that they need to provide additional information on.
Thank you. So councilors, we've got a draft letter here in front of us, or draft topics in the letter, I guess. What are your thoughts?
I guess if I added one thing, it's very minor. It would be also on our other like recreational services as well. The burden on those services, I think, should be included. I really like the tone of the letter, particularly the opening few paragraphs there. I think it strikes the right feeling of what we're looking for, that we are excited about the prospect, but that we do more of these concerns looked into as well. Thank you.
Other comments, questions, thoughts on it? I read an impact assessment by a town called Kincardine. Yeah, and it was kind of interesting, like they're in a slightly different situation, but they talked about they called it additional considerations, and they called capacity building. So how does the municipality pay for growth when that growth is not already happened in paying taxes sort of thing? So there was that element. They talked about community growth planning, and this seemed to have to do with oh, I don't know, I guess the time frame. What studies are going to be done? When are they going to be done? We need them to be done perhaps. We don't even know what we need to have studied. But the social economic impacts, and you know, the letter that we've got here mentions housing, schools, hospitals, emergency services is one that people at the conference spoke about, because how do our emergency services coordinate with the plant emergency services and stuff like that? They're really thinking that that is part of what needs to be taken into account. The decommissioning stuff was something that somebody really mentioned as well. They said, like even on the housing projects, they build housing for construction workers. Well, then what happens to that housing? Does it just get, I don't know, put into the dump sort of thing, or what? So plans for that part of thing, not only the plant itself, but the actual construction part that needs to be decommissioned after the plant is up and running, that stuff. Anyways, that's kind of mulling stuff. Thoughts? We want to cover as many bases as we can, because Energy Alberta is through IAC, will have to respond to some of these things. So, well, sounds good.
I understand this is only the first in a series of times that they're going to be coming back for feedback. Am I correct on that?
That's what we understand.
Yeah, so I think, I thought the letter that talked about having a really good tone. And I think it sort of sets the framework that our community is looking at this seriously. And that we want to have some of the serious concerns, even the ones that were brought up tonight, I think would be welcome additions.
We have things like childcare in here, like daycare. Or something that can encompass that.
That'd be under education.
Yeah, it might be in the correct one, I haven't seen that, but it might be written in their families.
Yeah, that could be a service to the family, so
Yeah.
be covered under there.
Okay. Anything else? Very good, Lana. Anything coming to mind? Admin, anything really you wanna?
Have you heard of Mercer?
Apparently they reflect things out of your too. So the social aspects, which is kind of hard to word, but okay, you have an influx of people coming into your town, on their day off or something. What are they looking for? Do we have any possible issues around whatever that might be?
You mean recreational?
Could be recreational.
Counselors going down, recreational, give it up.
Oh,
I don't know.
I don't know.
You don't either.
nightlight is up to.
Yeah, nightlife and any social services that result from some of the nightlife.
So we'll get this, yeah.
Anyways, you don't have to take that into account, but put it in there, why not?
I did read.
What about transportation?
Sorry, transportation. Okay, You mean like,
Well, to get from here,
scratch and like bus?
yeah, buses and there, like, how do we get out of town? How do these people get out of town and plan
Yeah,
to
so-
move around?
Transportation, some sort of public transportation to and from the site, perhaps?
Well, recreation, you could add airport to that. I read some of the, cause you can see what other people have responded already. Just to a degree on there, so some have clearly researched the situation more than others. I think one comment mentioned a lake, so. I think they might have some 20-year-old, 15-year-old info, but. You know.
So CAO Miller, we had a transportation, public transportation to and from the site, sort of thing. Did you mention?
The rec and, we could mention the airport in the transportation, if you're just listing things in that transportation bullet, we're gonna have a 15 or 16 little items in there, so maybe let's check it out. Well, if it's something that they're like, oh, no, we would, be looking to utilize that infrastructure, you know, whatever, or. You know, then that's something we should get, out in front of.
Really, this could be never ending then, because you can go right into, okay, are we gonna need a larger women's shelter? Are we gonna need more social support? It could be a
So
lot.
maybe that could be
Yeah.
the term, social support.
So I would kind of propose maybe under 4, which is healthcare and education, kind of adding that social services support as well. To be within there. And then we can add something on the community growth planning. As Mayor Announcer mentioned, under 7, the protective services / general servicing can add the parts about daycare and recreation.
Okay.
And then we can add just another one, maybe just under 3, which is the traffic impact, and put a 4, transportation. And you know, we can kind of list some subcategories of is there consideration about the airports, etc. Summarize that, okay?
Think so. Okay. Anything else coming to mind? I think the list is pretty good to start. It's hard to add for it.
I'll move council directed Min to submit the draft letter to the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada regarding the proposed nuclear project as amended.
With amendments as discussed during the meeting?
I like that even better. That's what I was gonna say next.
Any further discussion, clarifications? Okay, everybody clear on the motion, purpose? All those in favor? It is carried. Thank you, Ms. Miller and Ms. Parsons, yes.
Your worship, if I may, with my work schedule change, I have to apologize to council. I have to be up at 4 a.m. for a 2-hour drive to work, so I'm gonna have to call it a night.
TV off.
Yeah.
Don't worry, I haven't watched the Oilers game in the last 3 games.
Okay, next up, we're into reports. And the first one is my April, council event attendance report. Biggest one there actually was I went to a conference, in Ottawa, on, it was the Canadian Nuclear Association Conference and the Canadian Association of Nuclear Host Communities, AGM, which was where the AGM one was where we had some great talks with some other towns and so on. Any questions there though? Yeah, question, yeah.
What were the conversations around waste storage? Anything interesting in that front?
Nothing. That particular town, they had gone through a series of engagements where they asked their community, do we want this waste storage in our community? And so they had an engagement where The first one was, what questions do you have about waste storage? So they gathered those and they came back with some answers and answered some more questions. They did that 2 or 3 times before they got serious about submitting an application to become a waste storage, a deep waste storage. So, and they involved, students. My impression was it was as young as, like junior high. Because they, you know, look to the future, when are these jobs gonna be available and who would be the youth that they would be available to, and so you think 10 years out or so on. Kind of something for us to care to think about if we get into this as well. Yeah. Okay, next up was Mighty Peace Tourism Annual General Meeting. And I see that this, unfortunately seems to occur when we have, Monday nights sometimes, right? Yeah, you can speak to it.
I'm in conversations with, both, Director Bell and Mighty Peace Tourist Association to try and see if we can somehow resolve that little problem, but we don't, I think we can only attend once a year.
Yeah.
Because, last year you attended for me and the year before I attended once, so.
Third Monday,
Once in a while we get to go to it, but they were going to, take a look at how we can work together to change, make some changes there, so that should be coming soon.
In your business retention, if the person is into this at all, I don't know how her job works. Okay, yeah, they had quite the AGM highlights, very nice report here. Then we, okay. If there's no further questions on either of those, would someone move that council accept reports 9.1 and 9.2 for information? Councilor Good, so moves, all those in favor? Great, it is carried. Then we have the April 25 communication package. And one of the first questions in there, what's the in this one? Was Alberta's Electoral Boundaries Commission. So we have been sent a letter asking if we want to, you know, give a response to what we think about Alberta's electoral boundaries. And seems to me, where is this? They started work on this on March 28th of 2025. And they want to know if we have any thoughts on it. If we need a few weeks or so to think about it.
Yes. I know in one of our meetings with the Council of Woodland Cree, they had mentioned they would like to have it changed so that they are within our boundaries rather than, I believe, west
Slave Lake.
is Slave Lake.
Yeah.
Yeah, they indicated they would like to have that changed since they do most of their commerce in Peace River.
Yeah. Okay. And is there anything we would take out? Okay, Mr. Scammer.
Who do we now want? Like I.
How far? So how do we want to approach this then? We've got that idea. Do we need another week or bring this back to a council? Okay, so do we need to make a motion on that or will?
She's just checking how much time.
Written submission window will written commission, written commission window will close by May 23rd.
It'll be before council, right?
Yeah.
It's 14 days,
Yeah.
it's the 26th.
Well, to me, the Woodland Cree one is one that would make sense for us actually too, in terms of right? So would we write a letter saying that suggestion? That's when the time for something else to discuss.
That be us to make the suggestion or that?
With that
No.
woodland.
No, we can.
We can say that we would wish to have them with us, so that they can.
Yeah, maybe.
accept.
that can or there.
Yeah,
Yeah. We can invite them to become part of us, but
And it says a
Yeah.
series of public meetings will be held late May to late June throughout Alberta. So heads up that it isn't tomorrow, so anything. Okay, maybe somebody will make a motion that we respond to this letter, indicating, as Councillor Good said, that we would like to have Woodland Cree First Nations included in our territory, in our
Join us in our territory.
writing. But, yeah,
I can make that.
yeah. Then Councillor Shannon, so moved. Ms. Parsons, do you have an idea what that motion was?
Yes.
Yeah.
So move the council direct administration to submit a letter to the Alberta's Electoral Boundaries Commission. Something about regarding their public submission process, including to include, in supporting Woodland Creek being added to our boundary,
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah, and why do we want that? A little reasoning beside it,
Where the.
Because they
Ties to the community.
Yeah, they indicated this is more of a community that they visit, recreate, some we own property here.
And on our part, they are people who come to our community already. They're people, traders already. They're people who are now looking at joining us in our municipality for one. You know, they're already doing that. So I think we want to recognize our neighbors that are working within our community.
okay, so Ms. Parsons, you incorporate that into the letter, this motion passes. Yeah, good, okay, all those in favor of that motion? Great, it is carried. Elections Alberta, there's a letter from them. Well, this just details some of the changes in the election, Local Authorities Election Act. Took that one. That one. That. Okay, and what else was in here? May 2nd's package.
I'm close.
Did anyone make it to copy with the?
Yeah.
Director Gress did.
Good. Good.
Oh, at Java.
Copy.
Constable Sunday, posted a copy with a co-op session, and it was just kind of in the middle of the day, very difficult for.
Yeah.
Me to attend, just wanted to know if anyone made it up, so.
Okay, and I think that's sort of what I got out of those communication packages. Anybody else, anything? Okay, then maybe someone would move the items 10.1 and 10.2 for information.
I can do that.
Thank you, Councilor Carr. All those in favor? Great, it is carried. Notice the motion. None done. Comments from the public. Watching the game. Key communication items. Outside of this, we had spring cleanup is coming up rather quickly, the curbside. Cleanup, we had procedural bylaw passed, first reading. What else did we do here?
We are hiring.
The CPO.
Hiring CPO.
I think our wonderful financial statements deserve a mention.
Renews financial. Working with the Argo Revitalization Group. Yes.
That's an intentional play on those two words, correct?
Argo,
The Argo revitalize.
I believe so.
We're on.
Well, I don't know. We're responding to the IAAC comment period. Anything else that someone wants to say? Okay, good to go then. Okay, next up. We have closed, I think. Okay, we're gonna move into closed here. Does anybody